Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Lorenzo Gonzalez. Lorenzo Gonzalez, born on November 29, 2001, is the second child of Ana Cacho Gonzalez and her husband, Ahmed Ali Gonzalez. Lorenzo was an active and energetic child, and his family noticed his passion for sports from an early age. Without hesitation, his parents enrolled him in a local soccer academy through his participation in sports. Lorenzo became more cheerful and outgoing at that time. The boy's parents lived in Dorado, a city on the northern coast of Puerto Rico. About 20 kilometers west of San Juan, they resided in a popular residential area called Dorado del Mar. Unfortunately, Ahmed and Ana decided to separate, although the divorce was difficult. It seemed reasonable considering their frequent arguments. According to the agreement, their children would live with their mother, despite the circumstances. The children regularly visited their father and sometimes stayed with him from Friday to Monday. In general, things were stable, and everyone was satisfied with the current situation. On March 9, 2010, at around 6 a.m., Ana rushed to a city medical center, carrying her son, Lorenzo. This facility typically provides emergency care for critical situations. When she approached one of the staff members, she explained that her son had fallen out of bed at home and had suffered a serious head injury. However, the extent of Lorenzo's injuries resembled those resulting from a car accident, despite the doctor's best efforts. Lorenzo's condition was critical. His chest was severely deformed, and he had multiple head injuries. It seemed that he was no longer alive. The medical team attempted to resuscitate him, but unfortunately, all their efforts were unsuccessful. Finally, at around 6 a.m., Lorenzo was pronounced dead. Doctors at the medical facility tried to question Ana in more detail to understand how the boy had been so severely injured. Ana did not hesitate and share what she knows. What was particularly alarming was that when the doctor carefully examined Lorenzo's body, dried blood was found on his wounds. This indicated that the blood had been outside the child's body for a long time, suggesting that Ana had brought him to the hospital much later than she had reported. Furthermore, the severity and variety of the injuries could not have resulted from a single fall. Some of the injuries on the boy's face appeared to have been caused by a sharp object. There were many questions. Ana did not seem to know the circumstances surrounding her son's death, which was not surprising. However, her unusually calm demeanor raised suspicions about the situation. This may be why the medical center staff chose to notify the police and report the incident. The doctors informed Ana of their decision. Ana simply said that there was no need for that. She insisted that the doctors not contact the police, which surprised them and made them even more suspicious of her, despite her wishes. The doctors called the police about 10 minutes later. Several patrol cars with police and forensic experts arrived. Their first priority was to conduct a thorough autopsy on Lorenzo's body to determine the cause of death. They also needed to question Ana and her daughters, who had been at home during the incident. Ana recounted the first incident as follows. She said that she was sleeping in her room when she heard her youngest daughter scream. This terrified Ana, although she did not immediately understand what her daughter meant. She eventually went into the nursery, turned on the light, and found her son lying on the floor with blood flowing from his head. This sight left her completely paralyzed with fear. She admitted that she did not know what to do in such a crisis. She then woke her eldest daughter and told her to get Lorenzo's clothes and some other things. They rushed to the medical center. She also mentioned that, on the way to the hospital, she informed both Lorenzo's father, Ahmed, and her own biological parents about the incident. A few hours later, they all spoke to the police, who believed they were dealing with another tragic accident. Normally, inexperienced prosecutors are assigned to such cases in the country to allow young professionals to gain practical experience. However, this case was more complicated than it initially appeared. As a result, there were significant errors in the early stages of the investigation. It seems that these errors continued throughout the investigation, including the alleged flawed examination of the crime scene. When the prosecutors arrived at the scene, they did not collect any DNA or fingerprints, and the idea of searching for a suspect was not even considered. Rome, the expert who examined the scene, identified a bedsheet and a pillow. However, he ignored the mattress, which had a larger bloodstain. He later defended his choice by saying that he only focused on objects that could have come into direct contact with Lorenzo's body, since the mattress was covered with a bedsheet. He chose not to examine it further. After this limited investigation, most forensic activities at the scene were halted. As a result, Lorenzo's mother, Anna, and his two sisters were allowed to return home that same day and resume their normal lives. This decision by the police raised many questions. Anna's father returned home to clean up everything, to avoid reminding Anna and his nieces of the traumatic incident. He wanted them to feel comfortable in their room without any memory of this tragic loss. He disposed of the mattress in a city dump, claiming that the prosecutor had recommended this action. Moreover, the car Anna was driving belonged to her father and could contain evidence related to the events of that day, since the police had no plans to inspect the car. He could not be blamed for trying to hide any evidence. Lorenzo's family is anxiously awaiting the results of the autopsy to understand the cause of Lorenzo's death after the tragic event. They all claim to have no involvement in what happened that day. Forensic experts noted that the injuries to Lorenzo's face were not consistent with those that would normally occur from a fall. Even a simple visual examination showed a clear difference. As a result, the case was quickly reclassified as a homicide. Lorenzo may have suffered a brain injury and a broken nose from a direct blow by a blunt object. Experts noted several stab wounds to the boy's face, suggesting that the injuries were inflicted by a knife or another sharp object. They also concluded that the attacker assaulted Lorenzo while he was lying down. In addition, experts determined that Lorenzo had died much earlier than the time indicated by the medical center due to the new findings from the autopsy. The police ordered a re-examination of the crime scene. By this time, the house had been cleared of virtually all evidence, including fingerprints and DNA, because of the thorough cleaning. The police could not rely on finding any physical evidence. Among the few notable items discovered was a pipe used to smoke illegal narcotics, which belonged to the boy's mother, Anna. While this did not affect the investigation, it tarnished Anna's reputation. Additionally, a small bag containing various documents that did not belong to any family members was found. Among the items in the bag were a toothbrush and toothpaste, along with papers belonging to a recently released prisoner, Luis Gustavo Rivera Sejo, a mentally ill criminal known as El Manco. The papers indicated that he had just been released, information that was quickly made public. This discovery made Luis the prime suspect. Immediately after the autopsy, Anna expressed her wish for Lorenzo's body to be cremated as soon as possible. However, his father, Ahmed, intervened. When he learned of her intentions, he contacted the police and stated that the boy should be buried in the traditional way instead of being cremated. He believes cremation will prevent any autopsies that might be necessary in the future. Anna's wish to cremate Lorenzo aroused the suspicions of the police, especially since the case was being investigated as a murder. Anna's actions appeared to indicate that she was trying to destroy potential evidence of her involvement. In the end, the police sided with Ahmed, and Lorenzo was buried according to custom, just days after Lorenzo was buried. The investigation took a new turn. Anna was summoned to the Prosecutor General's office for further questioning. Anna appeared with her lawyer, who advised her not to give any testimony. It is unclear whether this was the right advice, as by refusing to testify, Anna became one of the main suspects in Lorenzo's death. It seems that her legal team had their own strategy for handling the case and protecting her. After Anna refused to testify, her lawyers held a large press conference. They stated that their client believed she was innocent and felt insulted by being questioned as a suspect. In addition, Her lawyer presented a version of events that had taken place after reviewing the statements from Anna's attorney. The police sought help from experienced colleagues at the FBI when federal agents joined the investigation. They focused on Luis Gustavo Rivera Sejo. It was clear that his release from prison was a mistake or a failure of the justice system. This conclusion was based largely on information regarding his mental health. 2 weeks after Lorenzo's death, Luis was arrested by the police during the initial interrogation. Luis admitted to stealing a passerby's cell phone. He also mentioned being at a fast food restaurant near Lorenzo's house in the early morning of March 9. These statements reinforced suspicions that he may have been involved in the attack on Lorenzo, making him a suspect. Anna's daughters, who were present at the incident, were then required to give their statements to the police. Anna and her parents, however, strongly objected to this, arguing that it was unnecessary and merely a formality. Everyone understood that the police were unlikely to comply with Anna's wishes, and they continued to interview the girls. The police decided to temporarily separate the children from their family during the initial stages of the investigation to prevent Anna from pressuring her children not to cooperate. At the same time, the police launched a new investigation into a man named Jesus Genaro Camacho. Anna's boyfriend, several others, were also under investigation, including federal immigration agents William Marrero Rivera and Arnaldo Colon. The investigation revealed that these men allegedly visited Anna from the evening of March 8 to the morning of March 9, 2010, the day Lorenzo died. Shortly after the police began investigating these men, there was a small breakthrough in the case. This prompted Anna to cooperate with the police by providing a statement. Anna asserted that she had nothing to hide and did not know anyone who might be involved. Through her statement, she wanted to convey that she was not protecting anyone. The next day, Anna contacted the federal agents again. This time, she mentioned that she had forgotten to share some important details related to the investigation. She revealed that on the night of March 8 to March 9, she and William were at her home. She also noted that she had consumed alcohol and used illegal substances that day, according to her. The amount of alcohol and illegal substances was minimal and did not impair her ability to understand the situation. She clarified that she was not addicted to these substances and only used them occasionally to relax. This information was not new to the agents, especially since they had discovered both drugs and paraphernalia in Anna's home. However, she still had to undergo toxicology testing to determine the exact levels of these and other drugs in her system. Luis provided his own account of the events during an FBI officer's interrogation. He quickly confessed to his involvement in the crime. He said he entered the house by jumping over the wall, causing him to drop his bag containing documents and personal belongings. He then described the incident and some details surrounding the case. While in the kitchen, Luis grabbed a knife and used it to attack Lorenzo. He claimed that he attacked the boy because he thought Lorenzo had seen him enter the house. Luis admitted that he did not want to leave any witnesses to his actions, which is why he committed such a brutal act against the child. After the attack, he fled, claiming that he had spent the night in an abandoned house. He insisted that he had no intention of harming anyone and was just looking for a place to stay for the night. Believing that Lorenzo's family home appeared empty, his statements were quite contradictory, especially considering his severe mental health issues. After months of investigation, the FBI abruptly withdrew from the case without any results, leaving behind much of their work, including Luis's controversial confession. It is important to note that the local police were reluctant to take advantage of this confession and continued their investigation. There were no arrests or significant developments for the next 2 years, and overall, it seemed that the investigation had stalled. During this time, another lawsuit arose between Anna and her ex-husband Ahmed regarding the custody of their daughters. By this time, the girls had moved through several foster homes and seemed to have adapted to life without the intervention of their biological parents. Ultimately, the court decided to award custody of the girls to Ahmed on the grounds that their mother, Anna, had not taken responsibility for raising her children. This decision deeply affected Anna and further damaged her reputation. Following this sad news, she suffered a nervous breakdown and was involved in a serious traffic accident that left her hospitalized for several days. Anna's condition continued to deteriorate, and her family was very unhappy with the private investigator she had hired. They were so dissatisfied that they filed a complaint to revoke his license. In addition, Anna's family sued the private investigator because he published a book that allegedly discussed the details of Lorenzo's case. According to the private investigator, one of the people present at Anna's house that day struck Lorenzo in the head around 11 p.m. After the attack, they tried to hide the evidence and make it look like an accident. The private investigator even mentioned individuals who were likely involved in the incident, although proving their involvement was nearly impossible. Notably, this man later published a book. Ultimately, Anna's family won the case, resulting in a substantial cash settlement of $500 from the private investigator. Another version of what happened, according to public opinion, is that Anna had intimate acts with 3 men at the same time in the bedroom. Lorenzo allegedly entered the room without permission and witnessed the incident. As an unwitting witness, the child was able to tell his father what he saw. In a moment of anger, possibly fueled by alcohol or drugs, Anna is said to have struck her son on the head. The blow was likely inflicted with an object rather than her hand, and the object was later discarded. However, it is important to note that this is just a theory and has not been confirmed. In late 2012, the Attorney General revealed at a press conference that there was evidence against Anna and her father. Records show that Anna's father met with then Puerto Rico Governor Luis Fortuño regarding the case. During the meeting, Anna's father allegedly handed the governor a mysterious envelope, the contents of which remain unknown. Soon after, a surprising development occurred. Antonio Segardia, a former attorney general and high-ranking official, unexpectedly assumed the role of representing Anna in legal matters, leading her legal team. In conversations with various news agencies, he stated that Anna had become the target of numerous rumors and speculations from both the media and independent sources. He was convinced that Anna was not only uninvolved in Lorenzo's death, but was also a devoted mother to her children. Anna now seems to have lost interest in regaining custody of her daughters, a right she had previously been determined to reclaim. Notably, Anna's daughters seemed to not want to live with her. They even wrote letters expressing their feelings. In one letter, Anna's eldest daughter criticized her, calling her a bad mother. Curiously, many of these letters have somehow become public. In 2014, the Puerto Rican police, after making little progress, asked the FBI to assist in the investigation. The FBI agreed, and upon their arrival, they conducted a new interview with Luis Gustavo Rivera Sejo, who was now in a psychiatric hospital for individuals who had committed crimes, with a psychologist present. He once again shared his version of events, however. This time, his story differed significantly from his previous statements. He claimed that he was at Anna's family home on the day Lorenzo died, but stated that he did not see or interact with the child. FBI agents expected the man to give a different account of events. As changes in testimony are common among people with certain mental health issues, the next person the federal agents were interested in was Anna. She was scheduled to take a polygraph test, but did not show up, claiming that she had more important matters to attend to, including her birthday. Then a strange incident occurred. Anna's police file, which contained various details, including her toxicology results, was stolen from the police department. Initially, a 20-year-old man was charged with burglary. He confessed to breaking into the police department, but claimed that he did not take any documents. After searching his apartment, the police found no evidence of stolen papers, so he was only charged with petty theft. As time passed, the police, frustrated with the ongoing investigation, once again brought Luis to Anna's family home to reenact the events. This time, he only talked about how he entered the house, completely ignoring the deceased Lorenzo. He said he was hungry and wanted a snack. He eventually expressed a desire to stay there overnight, but then changed his mind. Anna's then-boyfriend, Jesus Genaro Camacho, insisted that he had been with Anna. He admitted that he had gone to her house to drink and have fun, but claimed that he had left early and had not returned. The police continued to grapple with the question of who had attacked Lorenzo. They were particularly concerned about the motive. As many details remained unclear, Anna was never able to provide a consistent timeline of the events that took place that day. Many of Anna's statements contained too many contradictions to be taken seriously. One theory was that Lorenzo had witnessed something that could have implicated his mother, Anna. However, there was no evidence to support these theories, which meant that the police were unable to prosecute any potential suspects in connection with the crime. In 2015, on the 5th anniversary of Lorenzo's death, the 3 men who had been at Anna's house that day were cleared of all suspicion shortly thereafter. The trial of Luis Gustavo Rivera Sejo began to determine his role in Lorenzo's attack. The main piece of evidence against him was a bag he had left at Anna's family home. However, many questions remained as to why neither the police, who had examined the crime scene on the first day, nor anyone else in the house had noticed the bag before. The police later claimed that they had seen the bag but thought it belonged to a family member. The initial examination of the crime scene was not conducted properly. As the police believed it was an accident, Luis's defense attorney made every effort to keep his client out of jail, presenting the results of a recent psychiatric evaluation that showed the man was schizophrenic. Additionally, because he was missing his left forearm, Luis was incapable of performing certain actions on his own. The discussion focused on Luis's mental health, as well as various errors that were made during the initial investigation. One topic discussed was that a mattress on Lorenzo's bed was overlooked. Despite being involved in some of the mysterious circumstances, Anna stated that she found her son lying on the floor in a pool of blood. If this is true, it raises questions about how the blood came to be on the pillowcases, sheets, and mattress. It seems unlikely that the boy would have been able to get back into bed after the fall, especially given the seriousness of his condition at the time. The prosecution presented its own version of the events that evening. They believe that Luis broke into Anna's family home, assuming it was empty. According to them, he went into the kitchen, drank some water, ate some of the available food, and then left the kitchen. They argued that he had brought a knife for self-defense and, after further exploring the house, discovered that there were other people inside. This prompted him to leave the house. At that point, he accidentally entered the room where Lorenzo and his sister were. He thought Lorenzo had seen him in order to avoid detection. Luis decided to attack Lorenzo before the boy could call for help. He assaulted the boy and then slammed his head into the floor or wall. This testimony was partially supported by forensic experts, who noted that Lorenzo had been hit multiple times with a blunt object. Luis eventually left the house, but accidentally left behind a bag containing his personal belongings. While this theory seems well organized, it was never proven by evidence and is largely speculative. Additionally, the house was so meticulously cleaned that no fingerprints or DNA from Luis were found at the crime scene. In April 2016, the police decided to drop all investigative efforts related to Luis Gustavo Rivera Sejo. This decision was made because they lacked convincing evidence to link him to the attack on Lorenzo. Additionally, local police have ruled out Ana Cacho Gonzalez as a suspect. To this day, Lorenzo's case remains unsolved. Since 2016, police have not uncovered any new evidence or theories about what happened, and Puerto Rican authorities have made no further progress in their investigation. The public largely believes that Lorenzo's mother, Ana, is solely responsible for the tragedy. Most people who have followed the case feel that Luis was used as a scapegoat to protect Ana. Overall, Lorenzo's case has had a significant impact on the country's history, spurring reforms that have changed the way similar cases are investigated. These reforms aim to improve the investigative process and enhance evidence collection. It is important to note that many people are still demanding justice for Lorenzo and want to identify the person responsible for his death. Unfortunately, it seems that in this situation, the only hope lies in a candid confession from the perpetrator. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jack and Jennifer Edwards. John Edwards was born on July 12, 1950 in Broken Hill, Australia. He faced difficult challenges in his childhood due to his alcoholic parents. At the age of 17, he stole his mother's car and ran away. Leaving a short goodbye note, his family could not take him back, and he chose to cut off most of his ties with them. John began working to support himself, trying out various jobs until he was attracted by an opportunity with the Australian Department of Defence. In June, he joined the army until 2005. John has been married to 5 women, resulting in 8 children. For privacy reasons, the names of most of these women are not disclosed. His first relationship began when he was 18 in the 1960s, and they married. This marriage produced 2 children, a son and a daughter. John's first wife described him as controlling. He would restrict her spending money and occasionally come home late without notice. But overall, she was happy with their life. However, after a vacation in the United States with their children, the wife then noticed that John was frequently texting another woman he met in Boston. Unable to forgive him for his infidelity, she decided to end their relationship. John stayed in the United States with his mistress and wanted to keep the children, but his ex-wife took them with her that year. He married the Boston woman, but their marriage quickly ended. Due to his aggressive behavior, John returned home alone and tried to reconnect with his first wife. He often visited his children on weekends. Over time, his son and daughter became afraid of his outbursts. His relationship with his ex-wife also began to deteriorate. John's behavior became increasingly out of control, and eventually his children lost interest in seeing him because of his violent nature. However, John insisted that his ex-wife was the root of the problem. He believed that she was the one who caused the discord between him and his children. He then became increasingly angry and made threatening phone calls to her. He blamed everyone for the problems he faced in his life. John's behavior toward his children did not improve. His son and daughter were terrified of him and tried to avoid any interaction. Despite his fear, John insisted on visiting them. In 1977, he began a new relationship and soon moved in with his girlfriend. They had a daughter 2 years later. In 1984, they married and had a son. But things continued to deteriorate. During this time, John's treatment of his third wife became increasingly abusive. She was pregnant, but John's violent behavior caused her to lose the baby. John's rages became increasingly frightening. He assaulted his third wife, threw objects at her, and even threatened to set her on fire while she slept. By the end of the year, the situation had become so unbearable that she decided to leave him, but was too afraid to speak out. Fearing for her life, she had prepared in advance and gathered the children together, waiting for him to go to the bathroom. She saw this as the perfect opportunity to escape with the children. The woman climbed over the fence with the children and with the help of neighbors. She contacted the police. John was subsequently arrested. John's third wife and children then sought refuge in the city. Thinking they would be safe, all of John's children described their father's cruelty, aggressive outbursts, and emotional manipulation. Unfortunately, their concerns were ignored by social services. John had 2 daughters and 2 sons by 2 different women, and he was involved in custody disputes with both. Despite numerous reports from his ex-wives of his violent behavior and the children's reluctance to see him, he continued to seek permission to see them. The children were required to spend 3 nights a week with John. Despite their apparent unwillingness, social services did not intervene. The mothers reported receiving threats and fearing for their children's safety. Family members confirmed that John had been acting inappropriately and aggressively. But the legal system ignored this evidence. In December, a warrant was issued for John's arrest after he took his daughter home from school without permission and held her for several days. A similar incident had occurred with his son, but police believed the father had done nothing wrong. They thought he was just trying to bond with his children. Eventually, John's first wife was able to completely cut off contact with him. By then, their daughter was old enough to choose whether or not to continue contact with her father. Unsurprisingly, she decided to cut off all ties and ignored all attempts to contact him after receiving the restraining order. The family felt relieved, however. The third ex-wife continued to face pressure from John and had no way to protect herself. Meanwhile, John continued to try to build his own life. He began dating a woman in the 90s, and she eventually had a son with him. By that time, their relationship had ended. John began to stalk her, insisting that he wanted to maintain a relationship with their child. Eventually, the young woman came under his influence again and continued to keep in close contact with him. John promised to change, but this was typical behavior of a manipulator. At this point, he became increasingly cruel and aggressive. And the new woman quickly realized her mistake. She moved in with John and then moved out. Living with him was extremely stressful. She lost a lot of weight and was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. However, she eventually found the strength to leave with her child. She turned to the police for protection, and with the help of various organizations, she found a home where she could hide from John. Later, he discovered her address and repeatedly showed up. Trying to break down the door and threaten her, John made several attempts to kidnap her son and eventually pressured the woman into giving him partial custody. As a result, the boy would occasionally stay at his father's house, where John also had 2 children with his third wife. When those children grew up, they chose to cut ties with their father. John later remarried, a skillful manipulator. He knew how to charm women, showering them with attention and affection. John's new wife became pregnant, but he forced her to have an abortion, and she refused. This angered him. John then made the situation worse by attacking her, pushing her down the stairs and beating her for a long time. It appeared that he intended to harm the child. As the 5th wife claimed, he aimed for her stomach with each blow. Despite his violence, she defended herself, and the child was delivered safely. John's 5th wife then fled to women's shelters to escape him. However, he found her and arranged meetings while constantly threatening her and demanding her to return to protect her child. She sought a divorce and sole custody of the child, which she was granted in September 2000. Tragically, in 2008, his 5th wife was diagnosed with a terminal illness and died in September, leaving John with custody of their 8-year-old son. By that time, John had 6 children with 4 different women, each of whom he had negatively impacted. In October 2000, John met 19-year-old Olga from Russia on a dating website. Charming and polite, John showered her with compliments and described his homeland as a wonderful place. Their romance began, and Olga flew to Australia at John's invitation to be with him. She moved in with him in August 2001, and they married on November 10 of that year. Their son Jack was born in September 2002, and daughter Jennifer in August 2004. Jack and Jennifer grew up in their family home in the quiet Sydney suburb of Pett Hills. Known for its natural beauty and close-knit community, however, John treated Olga in much the same way as he had treated his previous wives. He was verbally abusive and sought to control her every move. Unlike her previous partners, Olga found herself with no choice, with nowhere to run and no one to help her. Faced with these circumstances, Olga tried to adapt and keep the peace at the slightest sign of disobedience. John would threaten to take their children away and deport her back to Russia, fearing for her children. Olga endured the situation, John also controlled their finances, including Olga's salary, and dictated how she should dress and care for herself. His control and cruelty created an environment in which she felt extremely miserable. Jack was a kind, adventurous, an active young man who loved sports and video games. He was also very friendly and got along well with everyone around him. His younger sister, Jennifer, was quieter and calmer than him. She enjoyed spending hours reading, loved animals, and loved skateboarding. As she grew up, she had a dog and a pet rabbit. She spent a lot of time playing with her pets, driven by her love of animals. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, a goal she often shared with her classmates and family. When Jack was about 10 years old, John began abusing him. John treated Jack the same way he had treated his wife. Jack reacted and disobeyed his father. In response, John resorted to cruel methods to inflict pain on Jack without leaving visible marks, such as breaking his fingers with heavy objects. This bullying continued for years, leaving the boy in constant fear. He often tried to call the police for help, but his mother prevented him from doing so each time, fearing that she might lose him. To cope, Jack began sleeping with a baseball bat in his room, only feeling safe when it was hidden under his pillow. During this time, Jennifer, who also witnessed the abuse, began sleeping with a knife under her pillow in 2015. During this time, the family's trip to Paris turned chaotic when a serious fight broke out between Jack and his father, John. Jack ran out of the hotel, but John chased him down the street, assaulting him by pinning him against a wall and choking him. The situation escalated, prompting passers-by to intervene. Jack then wanted to call the police, but his mother begged him not to. He complied, but the violence continued. With John becoming increasingly angry, the father's cruelty worsened over time. In December 2015, Olga decided that she could no longer tolerate his behavior and expressed her intention to file for divorce. John begged her to stay, promising to change. Olga eventually gave him another chance, but things only got worse. In January 2016, Olga became concerned and contacted the police after her son, Jack, went missing. Fortunately, the police found him within a few hours. It turned out that Jack had run away from home and did not want to return to avoid danger. Although it was clear that Jack was in a dangerous situation, the police returned him to Olga's family. Tensions continued to rise until March 2016, when Olga finally decided to take the children. On March 11, she went to a neighboring city to stay with friends, during which time she learned about John's stalking of her and his ex-wives. Fearing for her safety, she asked her friends not to reveal her whereabouts. However, despite these precautions, a friend accidentally led John to the house where Olga and the children were hiding. In April 2016, a trial began for Olga and John. Olga, along with the children, sought a protection order against John to ensure their safety. In response, John stated in court that the children were in danger of being cared for by their mother without him. During this time, he also consulted a psychiatrist who diagnosed him with anxiety and depression. However, the psychotherapist noted that John was generally doing well. John used this situation to prove that he was actively working on his problems. The court ruled that John must be informed about the whereabouts of his son and daughter. However, the court also decided that John must not come within 500 meters of Olga and the children. Despite this, he continued to follow them and try to contact them. One day, he went to Jennifer's school and tried to give her a dog. He also met Jack at the police station and wanted to send him a letter of apology. Meanwhile, John hired a private investigator to spy on his family. In February 2017, a private investigator found Olga at a yoga studio. John later confessed to the police that he regularly went to the studio to work out. The staff noticed his strange behavior and believed that he was there primarily to stalk women. When Olga reported John for violating the restraining order, police dismissed her complaint and accepted John's explanation that it was accidental. Olga claimed that the situation was clearly a case of stalking. But her complaint was ignored. John later went to the police station to file a report that he disputed Olga's allegations against him. His intention was to increase his chances of gaining custody of the children, but that didn't help him. In February 2018, the court granted Olga sole custody of the children, and they were not required to have contact with their father. Olga and the children were relieved to believe that they had finally secured their safety. However, the real struggle was just beginning. On June 25, 2018, John Edwards rented a car and began stalking Olga and the children. He visited a computer expert and deleted all the data from his hard drive and browser. On the 4th of July, he took the weapon out of his locker at 4:45 p.m. Jennifer got off the school bus and sent a text message, not realizing that John was following her around 5 p.m. Jennifer's neighbor heard several loud bangs and ran to the porch, where he saw John leaving the house. The neighbor tried to ask John what had happened, but John quietly got into his car and drove away, realizing the danger. The neighbor knocked on the door, but received no response. The neighbor then quickly called the police and reported the situation. When the police arrived and entered the house, they found Jennifer and her uncle Jack under the computer desk in Jack's room. Both without any signs of life. They had been killed. Possibly while trying to escape the attacker, Jack was found lying on top of Jennifer, bravely shielding and protecting his sister. Olga returned home. Confused about what had just happened, police cars surrounded her house, and a helicopter hovered overhead. She learned that her son and daughter were dead, and that her ex-husband was wanted by the police. Olga immediately suspected that John was the only person capable of committing such a crime. The police decided to put Olga's house under surveillance, fearing that she might be the next target. However, he never showed up. The next morning, at around 6 a.m., the police arrived at John's house. They discovered that after the tragic incident involving the children, John, 67, returned home and took his own life. A neighbor reported that at around 6 p.m. the previous day, while walking his dog, he heard a loud bang coming from John's house. The neighbor then took his dog home, but later returned to investigate. The neighbor noticed a broken window, but was unable to enter the house. The police discovered a crumpled piece of paper in John's pocket that contained Jennifer's daily bus schedule to and from school. In the garage, they found a toolbox filled with shredded documents, burned papers, a broken tablet, and a broken cell phone. They also recovered 2 handguns from the house, which were confirmed through analysis to be the weapons used in the murders of Jack and Jennifer. The investigation revealed that the motive for the murders was related to a custody dispute. At this point, all of John's older children had stopped contacting him, and all of his ex-wives had filed restraining orders against him. John, feeling that he had lost everything, he decided to kill his children. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had meticulously planned this crime. First, he bought the weapons to commit the crime. Then, he mapped out the children's daily routine, the school bus schedule, and his wife's working hours. John also made numerous online searches related to his plan. He deleted his browsing history and destroyed all notes to hide his tracks. But some information was still recovered. The tragic events did not stop there. Olga was deeply saddened and could not bear the loss of her children, seeing Olga in pain. Her mother came from Russia to support her. She took care of Olga and encouraged her mentally, hoping to help her heal. However, after a while, the mother had to return home. 4 months later, against her mother's advice, Olga decided to stay in Australia. Tragically, just 5 months after her 2 children were murdered, Olga also passed away. For a long time, Olga lived in the house where John had murdered their son and daughter, often sleeping in her son's bed. It was in this house that a neighbor found Olga's body. The heartbreaking story of Olga and her children captured the public's attention. The children still suffered daily abuse and were forced to sleep near weapons. Separating themselves from their abusive father proved difficult, and the authorities largely ignored Olga's many complaints. in response to public pressure and concerns that the case might be covered up. The state police department launched an internal investigation to determine what factors contributed to the tragic event. The investigation found that a number of police officers had been negligent in their duties. There were no reports of harassment in yoga classes, and attempts to contact the children, despite court restrictions, went unpunished even during the struggle. Olga encountered opposition. The lawyer did not consider John dangerous. He completely ignored existing restraining orders issued by all of his ex-wives. An investigation was launched into the lawyer's conduct in custody cases. The defense lawyer ignored the testimony of the teenagers, who reported that John had repeatedly emotionally abused them. He claimed that he did not find their testimony credible because they were too young. This negligence allowed John to continue his harmful behavior unchecked. The situations involving Olga, Jack, and Jennifer have highlighted weaknesses in the Australian system and prompted a re-evaluation of social protection and guardianship policies around the world. Efforts to modernize the system have begun, with the aim of improving the response to domestic violence. The lack of oversight from social services and the police allowed John not only to take the lives of his 2 children, but also to escape the consequences of his actions. John Edwards will always be remembered as a murderer who did not have the courage to face the consequences of his actions. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the disturbing case of Ryan Weingarten. In the shadow of seemingly peaceful family relationships, sometimes lurk horrifying secrets. The case of Ryan Weingarten and his sister Gioele is a terrifying example of human depravity. At the same time, the terrible consequences of greed and the desire to protect shameful secrets, a blood relationship turned into a nightmare. This devastating event shook an entire community and left an indelible mark. Ryan's case revolves around jealousy, a person willing to kill to keep their secrets hidden. The story takes place in Holland, Michigan, a small town known for its rich Dutch heritage and culture. The town's charm and beautiful scenery create a pleasant atmosphere. Newlyweds Gioele and Brink lived in a northern town that seemed perfect for they to build their future together. They were excited to begin renovating their new home. Sadly, jealousy and hidden secrets shattered that happiness. Now, let's talk about Pam, Ryan's wife. She kept a devastating secret for 25 years to protect her family, career, and reputation. The burden of hiding this truth became unbearable, and on January 18, 2013, it all came to light in front of detectives. Pam revealed the long-held secret that had haunted her out of love and fear. She allowed her husband to dominate her life. Ryan controlled whom she could talk to and even threatened her life. For 25 years, she lived in torment with the knowledge of how Gioele and Rick were murdered back in time. When Gioele was 19 and Rick was 22, they met at work in 1984. Rick was so taken by her that he told his mother he had found the one he wanted to marry. Gioele came from a large family with 8 children and was not financially well off, but she was ambitious, determined, and knew her goals. When she met Rick, she felt it was destiny, and they formed a strong couple. They knew they needed to work together to build the life they dreamed of. Soon, Gioele decided to move in with Rick, and on April 25, 1986, they got married. Just one day after Gioele turned 21, they planned to purchase a house together. After their honeymoon, they returned to Michigan and began searching for a ranch-style home with 20 acres of land on the outskirts of town. This type of property was perfect for the newlyweds, who wanted to start their life together. Rick successfully negotiated with the bank and managed to buy the property at a good price. But the house required extensive repairs. Fortunately, Rick had previously trained as a carpenter's apprentice, and his skills are very useful for renovation. Gioele and Rick moved into their new house in 1987 and started making repairs. On November 21, they attended the wedding of one of Rick's school friends. Enjoying time with friends, this would be the last day anyone saw them alive. By November 23, 1987, neither Rick nor Gioele showed up for work, which was highly unusual as they were both dedicated employees who never missed a day. Concerned. Rick's parents were alerted by their employer about Rick and Gioele's absence. Immediately, they went to Rick's home on Ransom Street. When they arrived, they found Rick's SUV still parked in the driveway, but what they discovered next left them shocked and horrified. Rick was found in the front seat with attacked by force to his head. His parents quickly called the police. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Department arrived and secured the area. Upon searching the home, they discovered Gioele dead on the marital bed, her face obscured by a bloody pillow. When the pillow was taken away, police discovered that Gioele had been assaulted 3 times. Both Rick and Gioele had been brutally murdered. When they had only been married for 18 months, the inspection of the crime scene revealed that nothing in the home had been disturbed. This created a mystery that baffled the officers. Initially, police suspected Rick may have murdered Gioele and then harmed self-harm in the car outside. However, this theory was quickly dismissed after the bodies were moved and examined. As no gun was found in the house or nearby, they then considered the possibility of a robbery. But further examination showed that all belongings were in their original places, all the money was accounted for, and there were no signs of forced entry, struggle, or any damage. Both Gioele and Rick were still wearing their jewelry, and the entire house was clean, with hardly any evidence found. Here, they found no weapon at the scene. Also, could not locate the bullet casings during the search. The police found fingerprints. 4 belonged to Gioele and Rick, while 2 were from an unknown source. 1 fingerprint was found on the toilet seat, and the other on the phone. The police checked these prints against their database, but found no matches, lacking physical evidence. They shifted their focus to gathering information about the victim's lifestyle and habits by interviewing friends and family. Ryan described Gioele and Rick as the sweetest couple he had ever known, stating he had never seen a husband and wife get along so well. Rick's brother, Brink, called the funeral an incredibly sad occasion. Gioele's family, particularly her sister Cheryl and Ryan, were especially grief-stricken. After the mourning period ended, the police resumed their investigation, exploring different leads, but still lacked any evidence. Multiple theories emerged, but all the leads proved fruitless and unverified. A month later, on December 24, 1987, another shocking crime occurred. Deborah and her husband were found dead in their backyard, both with their throats slit. This case bore similarities to the previous murder of Gioele and Rick. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of a break-in, and no clear motives could be identified. The remarkable point is that the 2 families lived only half a mile apart, raising concerns among the public and investigators. However, this connection was dismissed when differences between the 2 cases were identified. The murders of Rick and Gioele appear to have been carried out in a premeditated manner, suggesting a planned murder. Another theory caught the attention of investigators. Gioele was looking into financial irregularities at her workplace, and the dossier she took home went missing. However, this theory was eventually set aside as the police ran out of leads, and the case went cold. Despite this, the murders of Rick and Gioele remained in the public's memory. In 2007, 20 years after the murders, a group of investigators established a cold case unit in the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. This unit was led by detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely. In there, the Brink murder was one of the cases they chose to investigate. Although the documents were old, they managed to recover important notes. Venus and David noticed some remarkable details. During their discussions with friends and family, they frequently heard the name of Ryan, unlike other family members. Ryan often made bizarre comments during family gatherings. Relatives recalled that he exhibited odd behavior. For example, he once claimed to have a vivid mental image of Gioele's murder, stating he could see someone walking down the hallway to her bedroom. Cheryl remembered him saying, "Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something like that." Additionally, Ryan confessed to his sister Lynn that he felt a need to apologize to Gioele because he believed he had violated her. During the previous investigation, police had ruled Ryan out as a suspect due to an alibi provided by his then-girlfriend, Pam. She claimed that on the night of the murder, she was doing laundry with Ryan, and her account matched his, making his story credible. And then, it was later revealed that Pam and Ryan had actually gone to a friend's house that night to use the washing machine. Upon reviewing the reports, detectives found inconsistencies in Pam's testimony. Although Pam's testimony strongly supported Ryan's alibi, the polygraph test revealed a different story. When asked if she was with Ryan that night, Pam said no, and the polygraph indicated no deception in her response. This raised concerns, so detectives decided to investigate further by visiting Pam in the trailer park where she lived with Ryan and their children. At that time, Pam and Ryan had been married for 23 years and had 3 children together. Pam had first met Ryan in 1987 when she was a single mother with a 6-month-old baby. They married in 1990 and remained together since then. The detectives arrived at the trailer park and were greeted by Ryan. Since marrying Pam, Ryan had become a devoted husband and was actively involved in raising their children. He informed the investigators that Pam was not home, and they asked him about his account of the double murder that occurred that night. Ryan's recollection of events was quite vague. After the brief investigation, the detectives arranged to meet with Pam at the department later, but Ryan insisted on being present for the conversation. They informed him that this was not possible, as they needed to question Pam alone. Pam's account was consistent with the alibi she and Ryan had previously provided. Despite this, detectives Venus and David sensed that something was off. They were determined to investigate further, delve into Gioele's and Rick's past. As they looked into Pam and Ryan's relationship, they discovered that Ryan had not always been faithful to Pam while dating her. He had also been involved with another woman, Crystal Beelan, with whom he had an unstable relationship for 4 years. She ended things with Ryan when she realized he was becoming serious with Pam. But their friendship continued. Detectives located Crystal and invited her to the department, where she agreed to come in voluntarily. The interrogation proceeded smoothly, and no incriminating evidence emerged during the conversation. However, she disclosed a significant secret that changed the direction of the case. She revealed that Ryan had previously confessed to her about an incestuous relationship he had with Gioele when they were younger. A few days after the murder, Ryan had asked Crystal to drive past the crime scene, but she found it inconvenient, so they went to a nearby park instead. While at the park, Ryan expressed a need to talk and said he wanted to share a heavy secret with her. He then recounted the sexual relationship he had with Gioele, claiming that it was consensual. However, he mentioned that, in his last request to Gioele in the backyard, she rejected him, but he still proceeded with his intentions and forced himself on Gioele. Ryan showed Crystal pictures of Gioele in a bikini, expressing how he couldn't take his eyes off Gioele and that he was deeply attracted to her. It seemed he was the only one aware of his feelings. One day, Rick caught Ryan staring at Gioele, leading to some suspicion on Rick's part. Although he didn't confront Ryan about it, Crystal's revelation about Ryan's feelings gave the detectives a new perspective on the case, but her information wasn't sufficient, prompting the need for more investigation to gather more details. They needed to speak with Pam. When Ryan and Pam arrived at the office, it was challenging to persuade Ryan to allow the detectives to speak with Pam privately. Eventually, he relented, and the questioning of Pam began. In Pam's testimony, she revealed that she was deeply in love with Ryan, particularly because Ryan was encouraging her and her child to move in with him. However, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. That evening, Ryan took Pam to Gail's house, he parking in a way that would keep them hidden. He then led Pam to Rick's car. When Pam looked inside, she saw Rick's body on the front seat. Ryan didn't allow her to linger. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the house, leading her down the hallway. In the master bedroom, they have seen Gail's lifeless body, which appeared to be peacefully sleeping. Ryan picked up a pillow and placed it over Gail's face, saying, "Isn't she beautiful?" He then turned to Pam with a threatening look and warned, "If you go to the police or tell anyone what I did, this could happen to you too." Terrified, Pam fled from the house, despite the horror she had just witnessed. That night, she stayed with Ryan at his house. The next morning, they continued their lives as if nothing had happened. When Pam insisted on knowing why Ryan killed Rick and Gail, he finally confessed that he had a sexual relationship with Gail when they were younger. He was afraid that Rick might have found out about it. Over time, Ryan also revealed that he envied the success of Gail and Rick because he felt unsuccessful in his own life. He made money by selling small amounts of illegal substances. And after marrying Pam, she became the main provider for the family. While he stayed home to raise their children, Ryan was jealous of Gail's life and her husband, their new home. With her career, he was consumed by jealousy and resentment. Watching Gail be happy with someone else, Ryan was quickly arrested after Pam's confession. However, he maintained that he did not kill the Brink family. He only admitted to having had a sexual relationship with his sister Gail before her marriage. The Brink family had mixed feelings after the investigation concluded, but they were relieved that the case was closed and Ryan was in custody. The police searched Ryan's home, but did not find the murder weapon or clothing, which was expected given the time that had passed since the crime. The fingerprints from the crime scene did not match Ryan's, but the motive for the murders was compelling. As a result, Ryan was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His trial began in March 2014 in Ottawa County Court. The prosecution argued that Ryan was driven by jealousy and feared that Gail would reveal their incestuous relationship. 60 witnesses testified against him, but it was Pam's testimony that ultimately determined Ryan's fate. In Pam's testimony in court, Ryan reacted by hurling insults at her, leading the court to reprimand him and have him removed from the courtroom. Pam recounted her troubled marriage to Ryan and described the night he took her to see the bodies of the victims. Additionally, Ryan's cellmate testified that Ryan bragged in prison about his murders and expressed a desire to kill his other sister, Cheryl. Because she was assisting in the investigation, Ryan also defended himself, but his statements were erratic and confusing. He claimed that the authorities were conspiring against him, suggesting they needed to close the case. He alleged that the police had coerced Pam into giving false testimony. On March 28, 2014, the jury reached a verdict. Ryan Weingarten was found guilty of both murder charges. During his sentencing, Ryan shouted and made threats when asked to calm down. Ryan Weingarten was ultimately sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole after the trial. Cheryl expressed her feelings, stating that although she had loved her brother all her life, she now despised the person he had become. Ryan's mother never accepted the verdict and passed away in 2021 at the age of 90. Pam later divorced Ryan. He has lost all his appeals and remains imprisoned to this day, although it took more than 2 decades. The truth has finally come to light thanks to the efforts of investigators and the cooperation of those who dare to speak out. This is not only a story of paying for crime, but also a reminder that justice, however slow, can still be served when those involved continued to seek the truth. The case of Ryan Weingarten highlights the consequences of crime and also exposes the darkest corners of family relationships. Ryan's moral degradation: he killed his sister and her husband to hide his secrets, with his actions stemming from selfishness, jealousy, and sick motives. He turned his family, which should have been the safest place. Weingarten suffered emotional highs and lows throughout the sentencing, crying at points and flaring up at others. At one point, he quoted from the Bible and then exclaimed loudly that he did not commit the crime, expressing his belief that the Lord knew he was innocent and that he had only told the truth. He referred to himself as an innocent man who was shackled for no reason other than what Repper and Blakely suggested to his wife. He reminisced about the night his daughter, whom he referred to as his little angel sent down from heaven, was conceived. He encouraged his children to be good citizens, advising them not to cheat, lie, or steal, and to be good neighbors who were quick to forgive. At several points during his speech, he wept, stating that he was an innocent man stripped of his family and wife because of lies. Assistant Ottawa County Prosecutor Lee Fisher remarked that Weingarten's outburst only reinforced the opinion that he had committed the killings, implying that he was definitely not in touch with reality. Fisher added that the conviction provided closure for both families and signified that justice had been served, allowing them to no longer wonder what had happened to their brother and Gail. "My sister's been dead for 27 years, Murphy sobbed. "Now, I can go to her grave and say goodbye. You know, we're done. We're done. We finally got him, Gail and Rick. You can rest in peace now." Detective Blakely retired shortly after the trial ended. Repper said she's not sure who her new partner or what her next cold case investigation will be, but that she hopes to continue to bring justice to victims and closure to their families. This case highlights how hidden secrets can have devastating effects. Weingarten harbored a dark secret for years before it was uncovered. It demonstrates the psychological and emotional toll of suppressing the truth and how it eventually surfaces, often with significant consequences. Weingarten's conviction was largely based on the testimony of his wife, who revealed his confession after decades of marriage. This underscores how trust in relationships can be strained when significant wrongdoings are involved. It also shows how the burden of knowledge can compel individuals to seek justice, even at personal cost. The case remained unsolved for over 20 years, until investigators revisited it using modern interrogation techniques and social dynamics. This underscores the importance of persistence and advancements in forensic science and investigation, which can bring justice even decades after a crime. The murder stemmed from jealousy and unresolved issues within the family. It serves as a reminder that family disputes, if left unchecked, can escalate into tragic outcomes. Communication and conflict resolution within families are crucial, despite the passage of time. The judicial system demonstrated that justice can still be served. This case serves as a reminder to victims' families and society that crimes will not be forgotten, and efforts will continue to uncover the truth. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Viviana Parisi and Gioele Mondello. In August 2020 in Italy, where 40-year-old Viviana Parisi lived with her 4-year-old son Gioele and her husband Daniele Mondello in the small town of Venetia. Viviana worked as a DJ in a nightclub. Originally from Turin, she moved to Venetia to be with her husband Daniele, who is also a DJ. Together, they created electronic music and were well-known and successful figures in the local nightlife scene. Both Daniel and Viviana actively maintained social media pages to promote their activities. Viviana frequently shared photos and videos, especially of her son Gioele, portraying their family as happy. However, their online presence was quite public, with Viviana posting clear images of her child's face, which raised concerns about privacy and safety. Some people cautioned Viviana about the potential dangers. On the morning of August 3, 2020, at 9:00 a.m., Daniele and Viviana woke up and had breakfast as usual. They planned to go to the recording studio to work, but Viviana decided to leave later. First, she needed to take her son to buy him new shoes. This means Viviana will have to take her child with her throughout the day to ensure she is supervised. On this day, Viviana forgot her cell phone at home. She prepared some food and got ready to go to work, including a trip to the mall to buy shoes for her son. Viviana and her son left home at around 10:00 a.m. They arrived at the toll booth in Mila and continued their journey along the highway towards Palermo. While passing through the Turde Tunnel on the Messina-Palermo highway, Viviana had an unfortunate accident. Her tire went flat and hit a road service car on the move, in which there were workers. Fortunately, it was not a serious accident. After slowly exiting the tunnel, she stopped in the nearest parking lot, just a few dozen meters from the exit. Several witnesses saw Viviana get out of her Opel. Some approached her to offer help, but she ignored them. They saw that no one was injured, so they eventually left. However, someone called the police to report the situation. The police arrived to inspect the car and found no signs of blood. Inside the car, they found Viviana's money and handbag, but neither Viviana nor Gioele were present. A long time passed. Daniele was at the studio, waiting for her to return from the trip. He tried calling her cell phone several times and left several voice messages, but he did not receive an answer. By evening, when Viviana and her son had not returned, Daniele was worried about her absence, so he went to the police to report her missing. That was when he knew that something had happened to Viviana. The police were investigating the disappearance of Viviana and Gioele because Viviana had been involved in a traffic accident that needed to be resolved. As time passed without any news, her husband became increasingly worried. For 5 days, nothing was heard from Viviana or Gioele. She was reported missing, and the Carabinieri police and volunteers were actively searching for her. Several teams searched the area around the parking lot where Viviana had left her car. On August 8, specially trained dogs joined the search. At around 3:00 p.m., they discovered Viviana Parisi's body, located a kilometer from her abandoned car. She was found hidden in a bush at the foot of the observatory. At the time, drones were used to search, but the bodies were so well hidden that they could not be seen from the air. Only sniffer dogs can detect the smell of a decomposing body. Daniele received the news that devastated him. While Gioele was still missing, Viviana's body was sent for forensic analysis. Unfortunately, the condition of the body was very poor. The body showed multiple injuries. Observers noted obvious bite marks and pieces of flesh attached. A forensic expert pointed out that such injuries could have been caused by wild animals after her death. Viviana suffered multiple fractures, which are common in falls from great heights. She was found at the bottom of a 16-foot-high cliff. In order to gather more information and clarify the situation, the police began investigating Viviana's personal life. During the investigation, they began to suspect that her husband, Daniele, was involved in the incident. However, Viviana's friends and family had only positive things to say about him. Daniele admitted that Viviana had been depressed. She was even hospitalized for a short time, but was discharged shortly after. As a result, she experienced mood swings. Her relatives confirmed her difficulties, but noted that by August, she had shown significant improvement. However, It was difficult for them to fully understand her situation because they lived far away and had never met her in person until now. There is no information about the investigation into whether Viviana may have killed Gioele and then chosen to end her life by jumping off a cliff. Unfortunately, the search efforts were unsuccessful. Even with the help of sniffer dogs and drones, Gioele's body was never found. While examining Viviana's computer, police noticed that she had become increasingly interested in something called the Pyramid of Light, a work of art built using precise mathematical calculations. At the center of the pyramid, there is a spiral path that symbolizes the journey towards light and knowledge. Just days before her disappearance, Viviana had been researching how to get to the Pyramid of Light because she wanted to take her son there to be enlightened. It is important to note that based on her route that morning, she was likely headed to the Pyramid of Light, which was located 100 kilometers from their home. Viviana's recent social media posts hint at feelings of loneliness and reflection on her inner life. She may not have wanted Daniele to know about her journey to the pyramids. After investigation, the police discovered that she had been acting unusually over the past few months. She was often seen with the Bible, seemingly seeking comfort from her fears. She even held the Bible in public places. Things took a strange turn when Viviana publicly read passages from the Bible in front of the church. Viviana's family shared information with the police that Viviana had been acting erratically in the months leading up to her death. Viviana was concerned for her son's safety and sought refuge at the pyramids, but she never showed any intention of harming herself or her son. Police suspect that she may have been thrown to the foot of the tower column where her body was found, as if she had jumped herself. She would have fallen much further than where her body was found. During the investigation, the police found no fingerprints of Viviana on the pylon. If she had actually tried to climb up there to jump, she would have left some traces. In addition, the height of only 5 meters did not seem to be enough to cause her so many fractures. However, the area was home to many wild animals. If these animals were strong enough to move her body, they could easily drag her a considerable distance. During this time, witness accounts collected by the police regarding the Viviana's actions in the parking lot were conflicting. Some witnesses maintained that the Viviana was seen holding the child, while others insisted she got out of the car alone without any child or companion. Additionally, some observers noted that she was carrying a large bag. An elderly couple reported that after the car stopped, 2 people approached Viviana and tried to help her. Police have issued a public alert calling on these 2 people to come forward, as they are believed to be important witnesses who could help clarify the circumstances surrounding Viviana's death. Only they can confirm whether the child was actually with Viviana. Police pieced together a timeline of events from the morning of the incident by analyzing surveillance camera footage to track Viviana's movements. They were able to track most of her route along the highway. One particular incident caught their attention. As Viviana approached the highway toll booth, she said she had no money and was asked to pay with a credit card. However, it was clear that she had cash and a credit card with her as she was planning to go shopping. Police found Viviana's behavior very suspicious. After driving past the gas station, they located her at a gas station in a nearby suburb. She had taken a long detour to fill up there, which was unusual as there were several other gas stations along the route. Viviana had no problem paying for the gas as she used cash, unlike at the checkpoint. What was most important to the investigation was that Gioele was still in the car with his mother at this gas station. The boy was alive and well. The gas station attendant reported that everything seemed normal at the time. Just 10 minutes later, an accident occurred in the tunnel. Police believe Gioele may have died in the accident. When Viviana stopped and realized she could no longer help the boy, she may have made the tragic decision to end her own life. This theory was soon dismissed as there was no blood or injuries found in Viviana's car. Another theory was that Daniele may have been a domestic abuser, which led Viviana and her son to choose to escape from him. It is believed that she saw the trip as an opportunity to take the child away from a dangerous husband. However, this idea was quickly dismissed as Daniele was widely regarded as a kind and loving person, and few believed that he could be abusive. Of particular concern is the voicemail on Viviana's phone that Daniele left while searching for her. Unable to reach her, he recorded a reassuring message in which he told her not to worry, that nothing had happened and that they would not do anything to her. This statement suggests that he was comforting her after a troubling event. Daniel said he was worried about Viviana and Gioele, which prompted him to try to reassure her. However, Viviana had left her phone at home, so she could not contact him to explain the situation. This made him even more worried. He did not provide the police with a clear explanation of his concerns or any useful information. However, the police believed he knew more than he was letting on. Meanwhile, the investigation discovered that Viviana had been suffering from severe panic attacks and mental health issues in recent months, for which she had been receiving medication and treatment. Daniele mentioned that Viviana may not have been taking the medication prescribed by her psychiatrist. According to Daniele, she only relied on medications that she was familiar with. As a result, she was in an unstable state with Gioele. This situation could have led to an attack. Viviana clearly endangered Gioele. On August 16, two witnesses who had helped Viviana came to the police station. They turned out to be a married couple. They were unaware of Viviana's death because they did not recognize her in the pictures shown on television. However, when they received word that the police were looking for them, the couple agreed to clarify what had happened during their encounter in the parking lot. Witnesses confirmed that Viviana was holding a child in her arms during the incident. Neither Viviana nor the child appeared to be seriously injured. Witnesses noted that there were no signs of scratches, bruises, or bleeding. The child in Viviana's arms was conscious. The couple then suddenly saw Viviana appear to be in a panic and run away with the child. She held Gioele protectively and ran through the bushes. The two witnesses followed her, believing that something was wrong and that Viviana and the child needed help. However, Viviana quickly fled from them into the dense vegetation, and Viviana did not respond to their calls, causing them to stop searching for her. After the investigation, there were still no further clues leading to Gioele's whereabouts. The police discovered a medical certificate which included a psychiatrist's assessment of Viviana's condition. She had a nervous breakdown and became paranoid. Daniele became desperate when the police failed to find his son. He assembled a team of volunteers, mostly friends and family members. Amazingly, later that evening, while searching the area near where Viviana's body was found, they discovered the body of a baby boy. The condition of the body was tragic. The body was badly decomposed, and some of the bones were missing, likely carried off by wild animals. Because the body was so badly decomposed that identification was impossible, after testing through dental records, they determined the body was Gioele. Unfortunately, the discovery of the body does not bring us any closer to solving the case. Daniele believes this shows negligence on the part of the police. He is baffled as to why they did not find the body sooner, especially since it was already decomposed and was near Viviana's body at the time. After the investigation, the police discovered that Daniele knew about her serious emotional struggles but showed no concern for her or her well-being. Investigations revealed that shortly before her disappearance, he had begun communicating with a divorce lawyer. Viviana found out about his intentions to divorce him. Did this revelation cause her to take such drastic measures? Unfortunately, Gioele's autopsy was inconclusive. The cause of his death was never known. In order to find out why the family tried to conceal information about Viviana's illness, the police wiretapped all family members. During the wiretapping, the police discovered that no one in Viviana's family agreed that her cause of death was end his own life. Other than that, nothing suspicious was discussed. Her relatives simply underestimated the severity of her illness. Daniele's family later spoke out. They claimed that the police had conducted a poor search and had not found Gioele's body quickly enough, which may have missed important clues. They were confident that Viviana would not have taken her own life or harmed her son. Although they admitted that she had struggled with mental health issues of late, at the same time, Viviana's family claimed that someone was chasing her and that she was eventually caught in a remote area where both she and her child were killed. However, that no witnesses reported seeing anyone chasing her. They also noted that Viviana had the opportunity to ask passers-by for help but chose to run away. Despite the family's objections, the investigation decided to close the case. Viviana's family publicly disagreed with the decision, but their request was ignored. Viviana Parisi and Gioele case confirmed as a murder-suicide by scientific police. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Noheima Graber. Noheima Graber was born in Mexico. From a young age, she found joy in traveling. Immediately after graduating from high school, she began working as a flight attendant for a local airline. Noheima was one of the first Mexican women to learn to fly passenger planes in the 1970s. At that time, it was not common for women to become pilots, but Noheima was determined to pursue her goal. She paid for her own flying lessons with the money she earned as a flight attendant. In this way, she paved the way for many other Mexican women in the aviation industry, proving that it was indeed possible. This achievement was groundbreaking for her time. Noheima met her future husband Paul at a party where they both expressed their love for each other. However, circumstances forced them apart. Paul had to return to his hometown in the United States. 11 years later, while traveling through Mexico, he reached out to Noheima and asked to meet. She agreed, and after their date, they realized they couldn't live without each other. They started seeing each other more often and communicated regularly by phone. Their relationship progressed towards marriage, and in 1986, they got married in Noheima's homeland when she was 33 years old. During this time, she worked as a flight attendant, pilot, and business consultant in Mexico City. The couple lived happily ever after. Their first child, Christian, was born in 1991, followed by his younger brother Jareth a year later. However, they found Mexico to be an unsafe place to raise children due to widespread crime and unrest, especially in their high-crime neighborhood. As a result, they decided to move to a safer place for their children. In 1992, the Noheima family moved to the small, friendly town of Fairfield, Iowa, USA. The town was a typical American suburb with a low crime rate and a tight-knit community, home to less than 10,000 residents at the time. It was also Paul's hometown. Noheima was a homemaker, while her husband had a good job to support the family. Soon after, the Noheimas welcomed a daughter. For many years, the Noheima family was respected in the community and was known as friendly, humble, and decent people. Noheima was very active and enjoyed hiking in nature. This lifestyle continued until her children grew up and had their own families. Then, conflicts began to arise between Noheima and Paul, which eventually led to divorce. Despite the divorce, both parents maintained a strong relationship with their children. They also kept in touch with each other, calling and talking regularly, and occasionally having dinner together. Paul was a devoted father, actively involved in his children's education. He spent time with them and supported their education. This support continued even after his children were grown. At that time, Noheima, who was in her 50s, and finding single life uninteresting, decided to pursue her childhood dream of becoming a teacher. She earned a degree in English and a teaching certificate from the University of Iowa in nearby Mount Pleasant. In early 2012, Noheima began teaching at Fairfield High School, where she quickly became popular among students and staff. The students showed her a lot of affection, which set her apart from other teachers. She also taught Spanish part-time. On November 2, 2021, Noheima did not return home after work. She lived alone, so no one knew what happened to Noheima. It was not until the next morning that the staff at her school noticed that Noheima had not come to work. Her colleagues tried to contact her by phone and through social media, but they received no response. Worried, they contacted her ex-husband, Paul. He was worried because he knew Noheima was a responsible person and would never skip work without informing anyone. Feeling worried, he decided to check on her and drove to her house. No one answered his knock, so Paul began looking through the windows but saw no signs of anything unusual inside. He became concerned that Noheima might have had a medical emergency. He then called the police for assistance. The officers took Paul's statement and went to the house. When they opened the door, the inside was empty and nothing unusual was found. The police quickly questioned those close to Noheima and learned that Noheima was last seen leaving school. She got into her car and drove away. Noheima often went for a walk in the park to enjoy nature after a day's work. The police tracked her phone and confirmed her daily routine. After work that day, she went for a walk in the park. Police requested surveillance camera footage from the park and began an investigation. A family member provided valuable information about Noheima's daily walking route. During the investigation at Chautauqua Park, police discovered Noheima's body. The criminals had attempted to conceal it by covering it with a tarp and placing old iron bars over it. Forensic experts searched the scene for clues that could lead to a suspect, but unfortunately, they found none. The discovery of Noheima's body left locals terrified, worried that a dangerous man was on the loose. To increase security, public patrols were set up in the park. Police carefully examined the crime scene, suspecting that the killer might have returned. Meanwhile, an autopsy was underway. The forensic expert determined that Noheima had died from blunt force trauma to the head, indicating she had been brutally beaten, likely with a bat. It was hard to fathom who could commit such a horrific act against this kind and gentle woman. Those who knew her insisted that she had no enemies or anyone who would wish her harm. A school student suddenly contacted the police with information about two teenagers. The informant revealed that these teenagers were her classmates who had boasted about a murder on social media. The suspects were identified as 16-year-olds Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale. Even though their social media accounts had been deleted, the police managed to review their profiles, which raised several concerns. Police began interviewing students in Noheima's class, and multiple witnesses reported that on the day of her disappearance, she had argued with Willard. He claimed that she had unfairly given him low grades, which affected his overall grades. Willard initially asked Noheima to raise his grade. However, she believed that with more effort, he could have achieved better results on his own. Therefore, she refused his request. Students said Willard had never shown any signs of violence. He had never shown cruelty in the past, and no one could imagine him capable of committing this crime. He came from a respectable family, but according to some classmates, he had a grudge against his teacher, Noheima. The Willard stated that he had never received bad grades before joining Noheima's class and attributed his drop in academic performance to the teacher's perceived bias. However, other students disagreed, believing the teacher was fair and graded all students appropriately. Following this information, the officers decided to visit the Willard's home for further discussion. When the police arrived at Willard's home, he remained calm and confident throughout the conversation. However, when the conversation turned to the murder. He became angry and spoke disrespectfully about Noheima. Willard initially claimed that the teacher had intentionally given him a low grade and that he had no idea that her body had been discovered. He thought she had just been reported missing and was the subject of a search. However, when the police confronted him and revealed that Noheima had been murdered and her body had been found, all the evidence pointed to his involvement. Under pressure, Willard quickly admitted that he had been present at the attack on Noheima. He claimed that other masked men had attacked Noheima with baseball bats and that he had been forced to watch. They then forced him to load her body onto a cart in the park and take it near the cultural heritage site. Willard denied any role in the crime. At the same time, police were searching for Noheima's car, which was missing from both the school parking lot and the park. When questioned, Willard again spoke of the mysterious masked attackers. He said that after the attack, they forced him to drive Noheima's car and left him in a secluded area. However, Willard could not clarify who the masked individuals were, what their motive was for killing the teacher, or how they arrived at the crime scene. His testimony did not convince the police. Police also arrested Willard's friend, 16-year-old Jeremy. Jeremy gave a similar account and denied any involvement in the murder. During the investigation, they discovered a disturbing notebook belonging to Jeremy. After examining its contents, police determined that in the months leading up to the tragic incident, the two boys had been following Noheima and recording her actions. They recorded details such as what time she left school, how long she stayed in the parking lot, where she went, and other specifics. These notes revealed a significant part of her daily routine. She would go to the park alone after work, taking the same route every day. On November 2, Noheima went to the park as usual and was attacked by Willard and Jeremy. They struck Noheima several times in the head, causing her to fall and become unconscious. Willard and Jeremy then dragged her off the park trail, where they continued to beat Noheima until she died. They then covered Noheima's body with leaves and branches before going to Willard's house to get a garden cart. Along the way, they picked up some wooden planks to help hide the body. They returned to the scene, immobilized the body, and covered it with a tarp in the hopes that it would never be found. Around 4:00 p.m., witnesses saw Noheima's car parked near her home. Several people confirmed seeing two teenagers inside the car. Unfortunately, none of the witnesses were able to positively identify the suspect because they could not clearly see the occupants of the car. The car was only there for a few minutes before driving away. A friend of Jeremy's provided additional information. On the day of Noheima's disappearance, Willard and Jeremy had called their friend around 7:00 p.m. after leaving Noheima's car and asked him to pick them up on Glasgow Road. The young man met Willard and Jeremy there. He noticed that they seemed disheveled and nervous. Neither of them spoke during the entire ride home. The only thing he heard from them was that their car was stuck somewhere. He suspected that they were involved in something serious. He then drove Willard and Jeremy home and said goodbye. After gathering all the information, the police returned to Jeremy's home with a search warrant. The officers found bloody towels, blood-stained clothing, and hair that did not belong to Jeremy. They also recovered 2 bloody baseball bats from the home. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Noheima. More evidence quickly emerged. During interviews, several students admitted to seeing messages from Jeremy on messaging apps. In these messages, he detailed how he and a friend killed their homeroom teacher, Noheima. Jeremy explained that he was motivated by the belief that Noheima had unfairly graded their work. He went on to describe the baseball bat murder, how they transported the body, and the theft of their car, which they then abandoned. The police examined the phones of Jeremy and Willard and discovered that the two communicated with each other about the murder. Their messages included details about the motive, the planning process, the location of the Noheima's body, where her car was parked, and how they disposed of the evidence. It is clear that the murder was premeditated, not a spontaneous act. Willard and Jeremy tracked Noheima's movements, and on November 2, the day she left work and went to the park, Jeremy and Willard were there waiting for her. They had studied her schedule and knew she would be alone. Police found an abandoned car belonging to Noheima along the route they checked. Surveillance footage showed that on November 16, the car arrived at the park, the Noheima got out, and 42 minutes later, Jeremy and Willard approached the car and drove away. They were wearing the same clothes found at their home, which had blood on them. On the same day, Willard and Jeremy were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. There were aggravating factors, including intentional obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. It is important to note that for this heinous crime, Willard and Jeremy were tried as adults. Although the defense requested that they be treated as juveniles, this request was denied. If convicted as adults, they would face life in prison with the possibility of parole due to their age. Initially, Willard and Jeremy wanted to be tried together, but Jeremy's attorney argued that Jeremy was not the instigator of the crime. He was named as an accomplice. Therefore, a separate trial was requested for him. Jeremy's attorney claimed that Willard was the mastermind behind the murder of Noheima. This led to a lengthy legal battle in which Willard and Jeremy attempted to blame each other for the crime. Therefore, it was decided to hold separate trials for the teenagers. The attorneys were successful in moving the trial to a different city to avoid potential bias. Jeremy's defense attorney claimed that he was an innocent young man who was negatively influenced by Willard. However, this argument has been dismissed when it was revealed that Jeremy had bragged about the murder in a text message the day after it occurred, describing his actions and showing no remorse. Jeremy was clearly an active participant in the crime. The lawyer argued that Jeremy was questioned without any adults present, which led him to give up his Miranda rights. These rights inform suspects of their right to remain silent and to have an attorney present during questioning. However, there was no evidence of coercion. Jeremy appeared relaxed during the interrogation and was even offered donuts and coffee. The pressure and intimidation that the lawyer mentioned did not happen during his time with the police. The trial for Jeremy was set for December 5, 2021, while Willard's trial was scheduled for August 21, 2022. On November 2, a hearing took place to confirm the trial's schedule, and Jeremy successfully postponed his trial. The defense team was busy preparing the case materials, and the Supreme Court was also involved. Willard's defense team requested a thorough investigation into the actions of police agencies. This investigation included reviewing police procedures and looking for any violations or inconsistencies. The defense claimed that the police had lied to obtain a search warrant. If they proved this, the lawyers could eliminate certain key pieces of evidence from the trial, preventing them from being presented to the jury during the upcoming hearings. The defense actually managed to block some of the data that the police found on the phone and computer. Attorneys tried to exclude any social media conversations and text messages that contained confessions about the murders. They claimed that Willard and Jeremy may have made up these stories or claimed responsibility for the crimes to gain attention from their peers. However, the defense's efforts were unsuccessful. During the trial, Willard's mother came to court to defend her son. She explained that when police approached her son on November 4, 2021, at approximately 5:30 p.m., they did not inform her of his possible involvement in the murder. She thought he was being questioned like any other student in Noheima's class, simply as a witness. Had she known that the police considered Willard a suspect, she would have made sure he had legal representation. She said the police visit took her by surprise. When she took Willard to the police station, she was in a hurry and accidentally took the wrong glasses. As a result, when she was asked to sign some papers there, she could not read what was on them. She told the police about her situation and refused to sign. The police assured her that it was just a formality to request permission to interrogate her son, so she signed without thinking. Now, she complained that she felt cheated. After all that had happened, she was not allowed to see her son because he had been arrested on suspicion of murdering Noheima. This situation made her extremely angry with the police's actions. Willard's mother contacted a friend who was a police officer and learned that her son, as a minor, should not be questioned without a lawyer. This information led her to suspect that both she and Willard were being tricked into expediting the case. She believed that Willard's statements were false confessions, coerced by the officers who had left him alone. This violated proper investigative procedures. The mother returned to the police station at approximately 7:30 a.m. and asked the senior inspector to stop speaking to her son, exercising Willard's legal right to do so. The police agreed to her request. However, official reports indicate that the questioning lasted a long time and did not end until 9:30 a.m. The prosecutor's office maintained that they did nothing wrong, explaining that state law allows for the questioning of minors if there is suspicion of their involvement in a crime, especially in serious cases. The police involved in the investigation denied the mother's allegations, claiming that they had clearly communicated the purpose of their visit and search, and that Willard had voluntarily consented to being questioned. However, the mother maintained that she would never have allowed Willard to be questioned without her presence and without an attorney. The prosecution said they had substantial and near-certainty evidence of Willard and Jeremy's guilt, which is why they proceeded confidently and transparently. Their actions were in compliance with state law. In Iowa, police can question minors without their parents present because the parents are likely suspects in the crime. However, if the parents are present, they have the right to request that the questioning stop or have an attorney present. The jury considered statements from Willard's parents and scheduled the trial for March 20, 2023. The defense then attempted to delay the trial again. The attorney argued that his schedule was too tight and asked that the case be postponed until later in the year. This delay was seen as disrespectful to the families of the Noheima who were seeking justice. It is unacceptable to them to assume that lawyers are too busy to adjourn the trial. Therefore, this excuse was not considered and the trial proceeded without further delay. The judge therefore set Willard's trial date for March 20, 2023. Jeremy is scheduled to appear in court on May 15, 2023. During this time, Noheima's social media page became a memorial page, with many students writing letters in honor of Noheima. The trial found that Willard was the one who delivered the first blow, which was not fatal. However, he then struck Noheima in the head several times. Realizing the severity of his actions, Willard apologized to Noheima's family and confessed to the crime. He was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder. In July 2023, Willard Miller was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Jeremy Goodale was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. This tragedy resulted in the death not only of Noheima, but also of her ex-husband. Paul had been battling cancer, but after hearing the news of Noheima's death, he fell into a deep depression and stopped seeking treatment. Without medication, Paul could not control his disease and soon passed away. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Christina Pcell. Christina Pcell, a 41-year-old veterinarian, worked at a clinic in the small town of Greer, South Carolina, which has a population of 35,000. Her colleagues all described her as an exceptional person. She was regarded as the best in her department and was highly experienced. She had a great sense of humor, which helped alleviate challenging situations at work. Her co-workers respected her, and management highly valued her talents. Christina had a young daughter, whom she co-parented with her ex-husband, John Mello, during the early years of her life. Friends and acquaintances all agreed that her daughter meant everything to her. After their daughter's birth, Christina and John separated but maintained joint custody. Then, she was engaged to a new partner named Bradley. Despite an apparently perfect life, but she was involved in a custody battle with her ex-husband, John, and the custody dispute between them was intense. On October 5, 2021, when their daughter visited her father, John, he flew her to Italy. This prompted Christina to file a complaint against him for violating custody, which further strained their relationship. Christina even launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for her legal expenses, and many people contributed. On October 13, 2021, Bradley, aged 65, tried calling Christina's in the morning. After she failed to answer, he went to her house. He knocked, and when there was no response, he entered through the back door. Inside, he discovered a horrifying scene. Her lifeless body was in the living room with rose petals scattered around. So, he immediately called 911, but it was too late to save her. Police discovered over 30 stab wounds on her body, mostly on her head, face, and neck. Although the scene was chaotic, it did not resemble a typical robbery. The police found unusual mystical objects in the house, hinting that someone unstable might have conducted a sacrificial ritual. This led investigators to consider the possibility of a ritual murder. Forensic experts determined that Christina was murdered elsewhere. Evidence of dragging was found throughout the house, and in some areas, the body was left behind and placed in various positions, possibly to take photographs of sexual acts. Later, the body was moved to the living room and covered with rose petals, with petals also strewn along the path where it was dragged. When information about the incident leaked to the press, they dubbed it the rose petal murder. At that moment, the police have not found any signs of forced entry into the house. However, Bradley, who alerted emergency services, had entered through the back door. He informed detectives that this door was always left unlocked, suggesting the intruder could have entered the same way. At the crime scene, detectives discovered clear signs of staging that complicated their investigation. They had to sort through numerous conflicting pieces of evidence to discard the irrelevant and find the right direction. Detectives have never encountered such complex and confusing murder cases before, making it difficult to determine which lead to pursue. They suspected that the murder was intentional. The perpetrator had specifically gone to Christina's house to commit it. And detectives must find out his motives and who he is. Inside the house, they found memory cards and the laptop in the living room, near the body. A transparent handbag containing a powerful illegal drug was also discovered. There were small droplets of dried blood, and Christina's mobile phone lay nearby. In the hallway, a bag was found with 2 white envelopes, each containing $500 in cash. A suitcase held a firearm, a single-shot self-defense pistol, and numerous documents related to a court case involving Christina's daughter, prompting detectives to consider the possibility that her ex-husband, John Mello, was involved. Forensic experts used luminol to examine the entire house, enabling them to detect even the smallest traces of blood. They discovered hundreds of tiny blood spots in various places, highlighting the attack's brutality. Christina suffered a significant loss of blood and endured severe pain before dying. She was stabbed 31 times. The police scrutinized Christina's mobile phone for any leads. Initially, detectives focused on whether her partner, Bradley, who found her body, might be involved in the attack. To compare information, they also retrieved his mobile phone to analyze its contents. Police noticed peculiar behavior from he was highly agitated. His reaction didn't seem like that of a grieving fiancé. He was trembling, inconsistent in his statements, and wore gloves throughout his interactions with the investigators. This behavior only heightened the suspicion of law enforcement. Later, it became clear that their suspicions were justified. While investigating Christina and Bradley's devices, the police uncovered shocking details about Bradley's life, clarifying his nervous behavior. They had strong reasons to suspect that he was exploiting her daughter, Jane Doe, to create explicit content. In February and August, he recorded videos and took photographs of Jane nude in various inappropriate poses. These materials were found on the phone and laptop that were confiscated for examination. However, it is not clear whether this was done secretly or with her consent. Doubts emerged after the police discovered more disturbing information from Bradley's laptop that revealed unsettling aspects of the intimate relationship between Christina and he. The police uncovered increasingly disturbing information, including a new type of victim, animals. Numerous photographs were discovered showing individuals involved in sexual acts with animals, mainly dogs. Shockingly, Christina, one of the clinic's leading veterinarians, who occasionally took animals home for temporary care, was involved in these acts. According to state law, such sexual offenses can result in up to 5 years in prison, and the offender must pay a fine of at least $500, which may be increased at the court's discretion. Law enforcement described these recordings as some of the most repulsive materials they had ever encountered. The public was outraged upon learning that Christina, a seemingly kind woman from a veterinary clinic, was involved in such acts with her daughter and dogs. After discovering all this evidence, Bradley Post was arrested on October 19, 2021. He was charged with the sexual exploitation of a minor and the distribution of explicit materials. It emerged that he not only created photos and videos but also sold them. Additionally, the police considered the possibility of his involvement of Christina's death, but he firmly denied any involvement. Detectives found no evidence linking him to the murder. There was no trace of blood on his body or clothes. Furthermore, Christina had died several hours before he arrived at the house, leading the police to doubt his connection to the murder. Christina's ex-husband, John Mello, is also a suspect in the case. His main motive was gaining full custody of their daughter, which he did not want to share with Christina. This is a common motive for murder. However, at the time of the crime, John was in Italy with his daughter. This alibi was easy to verify since he hadn't returned to the country. Despite this, investigators kept John on their list of suspects, considering he might have orchestrated the crime indirectly. John returned to the country on October 21, 2021, a week after Christina's murder. Following his return, the police obtained a warrant for his detention. He sought help from his best friend, Zachary Hughes, who was 29 years old at the time. Zachary seemed suspicious to the police, so they looked deeper into his background. He was born and raised in Morro Bay, California. The turning point for him came in 2005 when his parents vacationed in Virginia. During this trip, they adopted 5 children from Russia. These children had suffered abuse in their previous foster families, resulting in physical and psychological trauma. The adoption aimed to teach Zachary and his brother Ellie about morality and to provide the adopted children with a safe, loving, and stable home. Zachary and Ellie struggled to communicate with their new siblings, leading to frequent family conflicts due to misunderstandings. Zachary's entire family worked on the farm, but he had a special talent: he studied music. His parents bought him a piano, and he became very skilled at playing it, which was especially noticeable in high school. He started participating in music competitions and won first place at the Southeastern Piano Festival. He has achieved great success, even performing a solo program with the South Carolina Philharmonic Orchestra. In 2010, he applied to the Juilliard School in New York, where Irina taught piano at an advanced level. Not only was Zachary accepted, but he was also offered several scholarships for his exceptional talent. Thanks to his exceptional talent, Zachary outperformed all his classmates and became the only student from the USA selected to participate in the International Music Festival in Kyoto. Only 11 people from around the world were chosen for this event. Those who know he say he is a loyal friend, highly moral and very good at communication. In his free time, he used his skills to help those in need, often performing for free at rehabilitation centers, nursing homes, and hospitals to bring joy to people. By 2018, Zachary enrolled in a master's program in piano performance at the university. At that time, he had a strong desire to help people globally. This led him to volunteer for the United States Marine Corps and apply to a military educational institution to become an officer within a year. He understood the intricacies of military service, but at the start of his second year, he suffered fractures in both legs. This injury forced him to halt his studies and receive the title of Hello. Around this time, a woman reached out to Zachary, seeking a talented pianist for a church in Greer, South Carolina. He accepted the offer and moved there to perform regularly. And he received half of the donations collected from churchgoers. Initially, this provided a good income, but by the mid-2020s, the pandemic significantly reduced the number of church attendees. As a result, he had to find new income sources. He began giving solo performances throughout the city and state and took on additional part-time jobs. Additionally, he started a blog offering valuable piano lessons. To support his performances, he acquired portable electrical equipment, which provided him with the necessary mobility. While living and working in South Carolina, Zachary met John, Christina's ex-husband and a former music producer. John supported Zachary by helping him with performances and offers him a part-time job. Between mid-2020 and 2021, when he assisted John with household chores, which deepened their friendship. He became John's closest friend. As a result, the police questioned him about his possible involvement in Christina's murder, wondering if John could have asked him to do such a thing. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed CCTV footage from a camera located near Christina's house. A camera installed in the peephole of the house opposite captured all the incident outside Christina's home on the day of her murder. The footage showed a stranger wearing dark clothing and a hooded jacket entering her house around 10 a.m. A few hours after, the stranger left on a bicycle, this time wearing a mask. Christina did not leave the house, and no one else visited, until the next day, when Bradley arrived and found her dead. This evidence cleared Bradley from the list of suspects in the murder case, although he remained in jail on other charges. Investigators suspected that a stranger in dark clothing, captured on camera, was the killer, but they couldn't identify him. His face was covered, and there were no distinguishing features on his body. They then requested footage from surveillance cameras along the bicycle paths to trace his movements and began reviewing the recordings. This process was lengthy but fruitful. The bicycle appeared in several videos, including one where the stranger in black was loading it into the back of his pickup truck. Although the grainy footage obscured the license plate, the model, make, and color of the truck matched Zachary's vehicle. It seemed he was involved in the brutal murder of Christina's. The police obtained a warrant to search Zachary's house. There, they found a bicycle identical to the one used by the attacker. They seized Zachary's computer for examination. Through this, they discovered active correspondence between John and Zachary, uncovering over 1,700 text messages, most of which were encrypted. The messages were clearly coded and contained hidden information. Additionally, Some texts were jumbled. They probably did this to distract the police if the police suddenly contacted them. Detectives found the following clues in the messages. On April 17, 2021, 6 months before Christina's death, John asked to host a party for her. This message was not encrypted. On the day of the murder, John asked a friend how the musical performance went, and the friend replied that everything was great. Although it seemed like a harmless question, the police discovered there was no performance that day. They suspected that John used performance as a code word for the murder of Christina. All other information on Zachary's phone was either encrypted or deleted. He also used an access code unknown to the police, which complicated and delayed their investigation. Additionally, they couldn't obtain data on the device's location at the time of the attack on Christina. The phone was frequently switched to flight mode, including when the mysterious masked man came to Christina's house. It appears this was done on purpose to prevent Zachary from being tracked and to avoid involvement in the crime scene. Based on the evidence collected, officers obtained a warrant for Zachary's arrest. While they were preparing to file charges, Zachary was invited to perform on an international cruise. By the time the warrant was issued, he was already in Europe, so the detectives had to wait. Fortunately, when the charges were filed, Zachary had returned to Michigan, unaware that they were planning to arrest him. He could have easily left the country by crossing into Canada or taking another flight to a cruise ship. However, once he learned about the charges, he voluntarily returned to South Carolina and surrendered to the police, believing they were mistaken. On November 3, 2021, Zachary hired lawyers to defend his reputation, stating he was not guilty of any wrongdoing and intended to refute the slander tarnishing his name. However, he refused to allow the police access to his phone, prompting them to file a court petition. The court subsequently ordered full access to the mobile phone. Despite this, he repeatedly provided incorrect passwords, which delayed the investigation. Finally, by April 8, 2023, after approximately 700,000 attempts, the smartphone was unlocked. The police discovered crucial messages between John and he, discussing their encrypted plans to kill Christina. While these messages were intended to be used as trial evidence, they were considered circumstantial and insufficient to determine the trial's outcome. Zachary and John were known for their impeccable reputation, supported by many witnesses, and had no prior criminal history. The jury could not rely solely on correspondence and footage of a similar car to convict them. More new evidence emerged when a forensic examination uncovered the criminal's DNA under Christina's fingernails, which matched Zachary's DNA. Consequently, the police could confidently assert that he was the one who attacked and brutally killed Christina in her home. The defense argued that the CCTV footage did not clearly show the criminal's face or accurately identify the car involved. As a result, they labeled the evidence as circumstantial, as initially assumed. They emphasized that Zachary had no prior legal issues and was described by friends and acquaintances as a kind person incapable of committing a violent crime. Additionally, there was no apparent motive for him to attack Christina. And the lawyers rejected the DNA test results, claiming the samples were tampered with or contaminated. From the outset of the trial, once the public became aware that Zachary, the renowned musician, might face imprisonment, the court received numerous letters from dissatisfied people. These letters came from former classmates, teachers, Zachary's friends, and even people who didn't personally know him but admired his musical talent. Among the supporters were also numerous employers who praised his skills. Collectively, they vouched for his character, adamantly believing that someone as talented and kind-hearted could not be a murderer. In total, the court received over 50 such letters. The lawyers emphasized that Zachary had no previous legal issues. He had served in the U.S. Army, having volunteered and pursued education to become an officer rather than just serving as a private soldier. Additionally, Zachary could have avoided any legal troubles by simply accepting an invitation to return to work on a cruise liner. However, he chose to return to his home state and turn himself into the police as soon as he learned about the charges against him. He was fully aware of everything, including the warrants that the police were obtaining to investigate further. Despite this, he wasn't deterred because he believed he was innocent. The lawyers presented this as key evidence of his innocence. Zachary requested to be released on a $100,000 bail so he could be placed under house arrest with his parents until the trial, allowing him to stay in a calm environment where he could play his favorite instrument. He also agreed to have no contact with the families involved in the case. However, the court denied his bail request, leading to his transfer to prison. He remains there, awaiting trial set for 2024. He continues to deny any involvement in Christina's death. John also denies all charges. During a conversation with investigators, he explained that he fled to Italy with his daughter. He said he was exhausted from legal battles with his Christina and was horrified to discover that her fiancé, Bradley, had inappropriate intentions towards his 9-year-old daughter. Evidence suggested Christina was involved, as she appeared in some photos with her daughter. So John claims he took his daughter away to protect her from Christina, her unstable mother. He intended to challenge for custody using the explicit photos taken by Bradley and believed he had a strong case. If Christina lost custody, John would have no motive to harm her. Nevertheless, John repeatedly insisted he would fight for his daughter at any cost, despite he not commenting on his connection to Zachary. The prosecution believes Zachary is involved because his DNA was found under Christina's fingernails, indicating she resisted him. He may be either a co-conspirator or a victim of John's manipulation. The investigation into Christina Pcell's death has become intricate, full of unexpected developments and mysteries. Detectives persist in seeking justice for her, gradually assembling clues to identify the mastermind and uncover the case's dark secrets. Although the journey to bring justice to she may be long, but it will certainly not stop. The investigation team hopes that the case will soon be illuminated, allowing she to rest in peace. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Michelle Herndon. Michelle Herndon was born in 1981 in a small Florida town with a population of just 7,000. After finishing school, she enrolled at the University of Florida in Gainesville in 1999. Michelle joined the Peace Corps as a volunteer, assisting both people and animals. Michelle suffered from chronic, debilitating migraines. These attacks caused her to experience severe pain on a daily basis, accompanied by symptoms such as nausea and extreme sensitivity to light, smell, and sound. Despite trying medications, herbal teas, and numerous visits to the doctor, nothing helped ease her pain. In 2005, a new school year began. Michelle returned to university to continue her studies. To cover her tuition and rent, she worked at a fitness center. With limited funds, she rented a small apartment far from campus. At that time, Michelle was in a complicated long-distance relationship with a guy named Jason. Her best friend, Jessica, whom she met at university, lived on campus. They worked together, talked frequently, and often visited each other. Jessica's roommate was Oliver O'Quinn, a 27-year-old student from Georgia. Oliver was a great roommate and a friend to both Jessica and Michelle. The three have often spent time together. Michelle shared her relationship problems with Jason, and Jessica was always supportive. Oliver offered advice from a male perspective. Being a bit older and more experienced, they often valued his wisdom. Oliver, a nurse in the hospital's surgical department, began helping Michelle manage her debilitating migraines after learning about them. The hospital provided strong medications that greatly relieved her pain, allowing Michelle to finally enjoy life without those severe headaches. Surprisingly, Oliver had previously served in the Air Force and worked in Africa. Michelle dreamed of moving to Africa to help animals. She and Oliver could talk endlessly about it. Michelle decided to take a break from her long-distance relationship with her boyfriend, Jason. During this time, she met Scott, a funny musician who played guitar in a band. Michelle felt very comfortable with Scott. However, in mid-October 2005, Jason returned and pleaded with Michelle to reconcile, and she agreed. She began making plans to spend Thanksgiving together. Meanwhile, Oliver was not impressed with any of Michelle's boyfriends, considering them frivolous and unreliable. The reason was that Oliver was in love with Michelle. Many acquaintances had suspected this for a while, noting the way he interacted with her and the way he looked at her. Oliver was constantly involved in her relationships and even accompanied her on dates, which seemed awkward, but Michelle didn't mind. She believed that they were just friends and didn't see anything wrong with that. At the end of October 2005, Michelle met with Jessica to share some exciting news. She and Jason had decided that she would move in with him, 500 kilometers away. Jessica was thrilled for Michelle, congratulated her, and asked about Oliver, but Michelle didn't respond. Michelle began getting ready for the move, balancing her busy schedule of studies, work, volunteer activities, and now packing and buying household essentials. Despite the hectic pace, she enjoyed these tasks. As a result, Michelle and Jessica saw each other less frequently, usually only catching up during their weekend volunteer work. They planned to have dinner together on November 9, 2005, looking forward to catching up and sharing stories. However, Michelle didn't show up for the meeting that evening, which was uncharacteristic of her. Jessica tried to call her friend, but she didn't answer. She assumed Michelle was upset about something and believed that was why she didn't show up. Jessica left several messages asking Michelle to explain what happened and why she was upset, but Michelle never responded. Jessica decided not to wait any longer and went home. When she got home, her phone was dead, so she charged it and went to bed. The next morning, on November 10th, Jessica discovered many voice messages on her phone. One was from the fitness center where both girls worked. The administrator asked about Michelle's absence, as she had not been at work for a couple of days. Their shifts didn't overlap, so they didn't see each other at work, leaving Jessica unaware of Michelle's absences. Understanding the significance of this project to Michelle, Jessica became anxious. She worried that something might have happened to Michelle. Jessica tried calling Michelle again, but there was no response. She then reached out to all her friends, but none of them knew where Michelle was. Concerned, Jessica got into her car and headed to Michelle's house to check on her. Meanwhile, after learning about her daughter's disappearance, Michelle's mother also drove to another city to find her. The drive took about an hour. When Jessica, who arrived first at Michelle's residence, got there, she saw police officers had sealed off the area as a crime scene. It was then that she received the heartbreaking news: Michelle had died. Nearby, she noticed a distressed Jason. Michelle's mother later arrived at the house and made the horrifying discovery that her daughter was dead. There was no sign of forced entry into the apartment. All the doors and windows were closed, the lights were off, but the TV was on very loudly. Nothing had been stolen. Police found the body cold, indicating that Michelle had been dead for some time. She was lying face down with her left arm underneath her body. There were no wounds, bruises, or injuries that would indicate a violent death. It appeared that Michelle had fallen asleep and never woke up. Police believe that Michelle, 24, died of natural causes. Her body was sent for an autopsy and police conducted standard procedures, interviewed neighbors, and asked forensic experts to examine the scene. No fingerprints or DNA were found near the body, and neighbors did not hear or see anything suspicious. Police believe Michelle had used illegal drugs and died of an overdose. Police searched the apartment for drugs or paraphernalia but found nothing. There were only a few bottles of beer in the refrigerator. Next to Michelle's body on the bed was a half-empty beer bottle, which had only her fingerprints on it. As a precaution, the opened bottle was sent to a lab to be tested for any foreign substances or possible poisoning. Tests showed that nothing had been added to the beer. The medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of Michelle's death. She appeared to be completely healthy, with no illnesses other than migraines, which were unlikely to have been a significant factor. This led to many questions about how a young, healthy girl could fall asleep and not wake up. The position of her body was unusual for a natural death, raising further doubts. The expert concluded that Michelle died on the night of November 8th. The medical examiner is continuing a more thorough investigation to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the police are looking into who she might have been in contact with around that time. Initially, questions emerged regarding Michelle's boyfriend, Jason, who was the first to arrive at her apartment and call the police. How did he end up there when he lived 500 kilometers away in a different city? Police brought Jason to the police station for questioning. Jason explained that he hadn't been able to contact Michelle for 2 days. Concerned, he drove over 5 hours overnight to check on her. Upon arriving on the morning of November 10th, he knocked on her door, but no one answered. He continued calling and knocking without success. Seeing Michelle's car in the parking lot, hearing her dog barking inside, and her phone ringing, he feared something was wrong. Looking through the window, he saw Michelle lying motionless on the bed. He then immediately called 911. The police arrived, broke down the door and found Michelle's body in the apartment. Jason appeared very sad and distressed. He had an alibi for the time of Michelle's death because he was in another city, so the police released him. The medical examiner provided new information after a careful examination of Michelle's body. A small needle wound was found on her left hand, located under her body. Police contacted her doctor to see if Michelle had undergone any tests or procedures the day before, but the doctor said no. The needle wound was in an unusual location, atypical for an injection. No illegal substances were found in her home and toxicology tests showed no illegal substances in her system. Police also observed that a trash bag may have been missing from Michelle's apartment. They speculate that someone injected something into Michelle, causing her death, and then threw the trash bag away to remove the evidence. Police searched the trash cans on the street near her home and found Michelle's trash because it had not been collected. They found checks and letters with her name on them, along with a syringe and a bottle of painkillers. This prescription drug is very dangerous and an overdose can be fatal. Toxicology testing for this drug had never been done before because it requires a special test. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy had never encountered this drug in her many years of practice. When the final test was done, it was found that Michelle's body contained a very high concentration of the drug, which caused her death without leaving any trace. This drug is not commonly used for general use. It is mainly used by anesthesiologists during surgery. The police interviewed Michelle's friend Jessica and learned about her complicated relationships with Jason, Scott, and Oliver. This information intrigued the police, as they suspected that one of these men might have harmed Michelle out of jealousy. However, who could it have been? Jason had already been ruled out as a suspect. According to a friend, Michelle's relationship with Scott was very brief and hadn't really developed. He understood when Michelle returned to her ex and stayed out of her life. Michelle was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to be with him, while she saw Oliver as just a friend, although he wanted more from her. Oliver soon became a suspect. In hindsight, Jessica realized there were many warning signs in Oliver's behavior. He followed Michelle everywhere, but it seemed sweet and innocent, so no one saw him as a threat. During a conversation with the police, Michelle's grief-stricken mother mentioned that the last time she spoke to her daughter was around 11 p.m. on November 7th. This made her the last person to speak with Michelle. Michelle's final words to her mother were that Oliver was supposed to come over to help her fill out some documents. The police found it strange that she invited a guy over late at night, especially when he had feelings for her and she didn't like him. There had to be a reason for this. It was revealed that Oliver worked in the hospital's surgical department and had access to a variety of drugs, including painkillers. He had previously helped Michelle with her migraines. Michelle's landlord, Peter, came to the police station to share a strange story about her. About a week before Michelle died, Peter needed to pick up some things from her apartment but couldn't get in touch with her. This was unusual for Michelle, who always paid her rent on time, kept the apartment clean, and didn't ignore him. Concerned, Peter went to the apartment and knocked on the door, but it took a long time for anyone to answer. Finally, a shirtless man with messy black hair and glasses opened the door. He looked outside for a moment and said that this wasn't a good time. Peter explained that he needed to get his things. However, the man slammed the door shut and told Peter to come back in a few hours. Peter was confused and did not understand the situation. After he left, Michelle called him back to apologize for the unpleasant situation. She explained that she had a severe migraine and her friend was treating her. Peter saw a picture of Oliver and recognized him as the man in Michelle's apartment. The police found a butterfly needle in Michelle's bag at her apartment. This type of needle is often used to inject drugs. Jessica confirmed that Oliver had given Michelle medication to relieve her migraine. Jessica also mentioned that Michelle was afraid of regular needles, so Oliver used a small butterfly syringe instead. Michelle could not inject the needle herself because she was too afraid to even look at it. If she injected the drug incorrectly, she would die immediately. So the drug was administered by someone with medical knowledge. This again pointed to Oliver's involvement. The police finally understood why Michelle had remained friends with Oliver and invited him to her home. He had provided her with a strong painkiller. Police did not find Oliver's fingerprints on the syringe or vial. He may have worn gloves and disposed of them elsewhere, leaving only Michelle's DNA. To charge him, the police would need to link the syringe to Oliver. The vials had a unique identification number, indicating they came from the department where Oliver worked. The drugs were stored in a special refrigerator that required a patient number and staff name to retrieve the drugs. This discovery confirmed that Oliver had taken the vials. Later, the police went to the hospital to talk to Oliver, but he did not show up for work. It was discovered that he had been fired on November 9th, shortly after Michelle's murder. Police suspected that he had been fired for using dangerous drugs, but hospital management denied this, saying that Oliver had been fired because his skills did not meet their standards. However, rumors circulated in the hospital that Oliver had been fired due to a shortage of medication. The police found out that Oliver was working at another clinic. They went to the clinic and spoke to a nurse who was surprised to see them. Oliver was then taken to the police station for questioning. He said that he had heard about Michelle's death from someone and expressed his condolences. The police were surprised and asked if they were close friends. Oliver replied that they were just acquaintances. The police then asked why he talked to her on the phone every day. Oliver did not answer. Instead, he said that he had to get back to work and left. At that time, the police did not have a warrant for his arrest. Oliver calmly arrived on campus and collected his things. The guy told Jessica at the end that he was going on vacation and left. It turned out that Oliver went to visit his ex-wife and daughter and then flew to his homeland in Ireland. There, he received a license and got a job at the hospital. After the police took the bottle of painkillers used on Michelle for analysis, the DNA test results came back. Confirmed that there was Oliver's DNA on the bottle cap. indicating that he had injected Michelle with a fatal dose of the drug. The police discovered that Oliver had left but was unable to act, despite having a warrant for his arrest. Extradition to the United States is often controversial for countries that oppose the death penalty. In this case, an Irish journalist alerted the police to Michelle's story. He proposed publishing an article detailing Michelle's death and highlighting Oliver's possible involvement, including his photograph and arrest warrant, to alert the public. The police approved and the article was published in April 2006. Upon reading the article, Oliver fled the country to Africa, where he had previously worked, fearing public backlash. He was eventually tracked down, arrested, and extradited to the US, where he was jailed. Oliver was charged with Michelle's murder but pleaded not guilty. His lawyers argued it was an accident, claiming that Michelle had requested Oliver to inject her with drugs for pain relief. That evening, Oliver miscalculated the dose, inadvertently giving her a lethal amount, leading to her death. The dose administered was 4 times the lethal amount, which was surprising since no one could believe an experienced nurse familiar with the drug would make such an error. Oliver did not apologize to the deceased's family for this mistake. The prosecutor had a different theory, suggesting that Oliver killed Michelle out of jealousy and revenge, as he did not want to share her with another man. It was alleged that he deliberately gave her the fatal dose with the intent to murder. During the trial, witnesses stated that Oliver was in love with Michelle and had been stalking her. Additionally, Oliver's cellmate testified that Oliver confessed to being deeply in love with Michelle, but she did not return his feelings. Oliver overheard a conversation between Michelle and Jason, where she professed her love for Jason and said Oliver meant nothing to her. Feeling humiliated by this, Oliver allegedly decided to take revenge by ending her life. Oliver had gained Michelle's trust through his medical care. However, he exploited this trust by injecting her with a quadruple lethal dose of medication. As a result, the jury convicted Oliver O'Quinn of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence without the chance for parole. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jodi Jones. Luke Mitchell, born in 1988, was the younger of 2 children. When he was 11, his parents separated, and he stayed with his mother without moving away. The family lived in the small, middle-class town of Eat Houses, Scotland. From a young age, Luke was well-behaved. He enjoyed horseback riding, excelled in school, and had a passion for music. He entered secondary school at St. David. However, during his teenage years, particularly in high school, he began to exhibit unusual behavior. At that time, he met a girl named Jodi Jones, who was almost 2 years younger than him. Jodi was born in 1989 in another small town in eastern Scotland. The country is generally known for having many small towns located close to one another. Jodi was the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class family. Both of her parents worked for the Royal Mail. She was calm, well-mannered, and did well in school. The school director even commented that she had a bright future due to her achievements in class and extracurricular activities. Family was very important to her, and she was a creative person who enjoyed poetry and painting. Jodi was close to her eldest sister, Janine. Interestingly, all members of the Jones family had names starting with the letter J, including their parents, James and Judy. The family was decent and appeared genuinely happy until 1998, when the father began experiencing mental health issues and ended his life tragically. This was a devastating blow to the family, and the mother, Judy, had to leave her job to take care of the 3 children. The tragedy affected not only Judy but also the children, who were very worried. Eventually, Janine moved to Mayfield briefly to live with her grandmother, because everything in the house reminded her of the incident. However, after some time, she managed to cope with her problems and returned to her family. Gradually, life returned to normal. Everyone adapted to living without a father. The mother went back to work, and the community supported the family. As a teenager, Jones showed a rebellious streak. She wanted independence and began to experiment with clothes and appearance, listened to heavy rock bands popular at that time, and got herself a piercing. Her mother resisted these changes, particularly when Jodi showed interest in alcohol and prohibited substances. She began experimenting with these substances at an early age. Around the time Jodi met Luke, they were both 14 years old. The two met at school, became friends, started skipping classes together, and began dating in February 2003. They were deeply in love, and even planned to marry. Jodi wrote in her diary that her feelings for Luke were serious and profound, not just a superficial crush. At the start of her relationship, Jodi didn't tell her friends or family about her boyfriend, Luke. For some reason, she kept him a secret. This hidden relationship went on for quite some time until she finally decided to share it. She confided in her older sister, Janine, revealing that she had a close relationship with Luke and felt very strong emotions for him. Janine understood the seriousness of the situation and informed their mother, Judy. Judy was of course shocked by the news, but was afraid of pushing her daughter away from her, so she decided to act very carefully. Judy wanted to meet Luke to understand him better, given Jodi's deep feelings, and asked Jodi to introduce them. In May 2003, Luke returned home with his girlfriend Jodi to meet her family and get to know them better. However, things didn't go as planned. Judy learned from Luke that Jodi was smoking and drinking with her friends, and Judy also discovered she had tried weed. This makes Judy worried about her daughter's increasingly close interactions and relationship with Luke. Even before the meeting, Judy had looked into Luke's background and learned about some of his unusual habits. Many local people had unfavorable words about him, seeing him as independent and daring, and occasionally rude, though he wasn't involved in any criminal activities. After a brief discussion, Judy was convinced that Luke was a bad influence on her daughter and that their relationship was risky. She forbade them from seeing each other and put her daughter under house arrest until June 30th, hoping this would help her focus on finishing the school year without distractions. However, Judy's plan failed. Luke and Jodi continued to meet in secret. Judy found a path Jodi used almost daily to sneak out and spend time with Luke. They would kiss near her home and share their frustrations about Judy's strictness. Luke and Jodi was eagerly waiting for the end of house arrest to spend their summer vacation together. June 30th finally arrived, and Jodi, very much looking forward to it, was thrilled that house arrest would end. She looked forward to seeing Luke and spending time with him freely. As soon as it was 5 p.m., Jodi left home. She planned to meet Luke for an evening together. Judy allowed her to go but set a curfew of 8 p.m. However, she did not return home at the appointed time, and Judy couldn't reach her by phone. Worried that something was wrong, Judy began searching for her daughter. When Judy went to Luke's house, Jodi was not there. Concerned, she asked Luke about her whereabouts, but he said he hadn't seen her that day. She had not shown up for their meet. This seemed unbelievable, as Jodi had eagerly awaited this moment and had hurried to meet him. Judy became angry, suspecting that he was lying. Judy, distraught, did not believe him and demanded he answers, but he insisted he knew nothing. He agreed to accompany Judy to search for she. Luke's parents owned a specially trained dog, so they decided to follow the route she was supposed to have taken. Since there was only one road linking the neighboring towns where they lived, so they searched this route, but did not find she, which was strange. She continued to ignore their calls and messages. Despite this, Judy, Luke, and the dog persisted, keep searching over and over again, but still in vain. Finally, while walking the route again in the dark around 10:30 p.m., the dog picked up a scent in a wooded area and led them there. Luke followed the dog into the forest, using a flashlight. In the distance, he noticed something white on the ground near some walls. As he approached, he made a horrifying discovery. It was Jodi's half-naked, disfigured body, tied up. She had been killed in a particularly brutal manner, which deeply shocked both Judy and Luke. Judy became hysterical, trying to aid her daughter, but it was too late. She showed no signs of life, and her body had already cooled. The mother couldn't accept that her daughter was gone. Luke comforted Judy's and called emergency services. Soon after, the police also arrived at the scene and they were extremely shocked by this discovery. It was a literal bloodbath. Such violence had never occurred in this previously quiet area. Who could commit such a cruel act against a girl? The injuries of Jodi resembled those of Elizabeth Short, who was murdered in 1947 in Los Angeles. The girl's body was not only cut in half, but her internal organs were removed. Additionally, on her face was a Glasgow smile, which is a knife cut that extends from one ear to the other. This case is one of the most famous yet to be solved. Due to the similarity of injuries, so the case of the murdered Jodi Jones was dubbed Black Scotland by some media outlets. This gruesome incident caused widespread panic among residents of both communities. Locals fear that a vicious maniac has appeared in the area and expect new attacks. To calm the public, police needed to urgently solve the case and incarcerate the dangerous criminal before he struck again. The specially trained dog amazed everyone by leading the search party straight to the body. The girl was found in a hidden spot, known only to her, under a tree, where her and a friend's initials were carved. Some witnesses believed this was not a coincidence but a clue. Jodi's body had numerous cuts and stab wounds, primarily on her chest, neck, and head. Her arms had many cuts, indicating she actively tried to defend herself. Her neck was so damaged she was nearly decapitated. She was also severely beaten, with her hair pulled out. The girl was raped, and she died from strangulation. Forensic experts investigated the crime scene and discovered a used condom, along with DNA samples from 3 men on Jodi's body. These samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Despite public concerns about a serial killer, the police believed the murder was personal and Jodi was not a random victim. Naturally, suspicion fell on her boyfriend, Luke, whom she was supposed to meet. Typically, those close to the victim are involved in such cases. It was believed that Luke might have been the last person to see her. His calm demeanor and indifference to Jodi not meeting him as planned raised eyebrows. Why didn't he call or look for her? Perhaps because he already knew she was dead. Luke was considered suspicious by the police, so they decided to investigate him. Although he had no visible injuries, the numerous defensive wounds on Jodi suggested she must have left marks on him. His face and body would likely have been scratched. Jodi's mother, Judy, noted that her daughter's rebellious behavior began after meeting Luke, and she blamed him for everything, from her daughter's change in style to her daughter's murder. She claimed that Luke's negative influence had drastically changed her daughter. During that time, Jodi behaved so recklessly that she had to be put under house arrest. At school, in addition to her behavioral changes, she experimented with illegal substances. Jodi's mother, Judy, believed Luke was directly linked to these issues. Judy also argued that the dog didn't lead Luke to the body. She said he knew the location and led the dog straight to the crime scene. She opposed Luke so strongly that she asked him not to attend the funeral, partly to avoid media attention, as his presence at the service would have drawn interest from local newspapers. Rumors spread rapidly, and by the next day, the whole school knew what had happened. There were claims that Luke was involved in the brutal murder. Luke was known for being eccentric and called himself the town madman, but his oddities were never violent. Police suspect Luke is the one who killed Jodi, so they obtained a search warrant for his home to gather evidence and bring charges against him. While searching his room, detectives came across a peculiar picture in numerous bottles filled with urine. They didn't understand why he filled them and kept them at home. He did not provide any explanation for this. And this is just one of many strange things police discovered in his home during their investigation. His home was filled with satanic symbols, and he was notably obsessed with the singer Marilyn Manson. From the point of view of the investigation, all of this is not in the suspect's favor. However, could such eccentricities really indicate he was capable of a violent crime? In spite of his peculiar behavior, Luke denied any involvement in the crime. From the moment the police expressed their suspicions, he insisted that he loved Jodi and could never harm her. During his discussion with investigators, he mentioned a hair clip, and this raised suspicion as the hairpin was not seen when her body was discovered. Furthermore, his description of her clothing suggested he saw her later in the day, contradicting his claim that he hadn't seen her after school. According to him, she had different clothes and a hair clip at school, which didn't align with his story. The DNA on the used condom did not match Luke's. However, Luke's DNA was found on Jodi's bra among other unidentified samples. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him, but he was still the main suspect in the murder investigation and was called in for questioning. Investigators also spoke with his parents. Local residents' opinion of him turned very negative, and teachers at the school tried to isolate him from other students out of safety concerns but were unsuccessful. After 2 months, Luke returned to his class, not wanting to study separately. Consequently, the school administration had to suspend Luke from classes for the duration of the investigation. For the next 10 months, Luke remained the sole suspect. The police focused exclusively on him and did not consider other potential suspects. Ultimately, based on circumstantial evidence, Luke, 15 years old, was arrested for the murder of 14-year-old Jodi Jones. He also faced charges for possessing and carrying a knife in a school setting. One of the challenges in the investigation, besides the lack of evidence, was determining the motive for the murder. The police faced an issue because Luke was below the age of criminal responsibility. Later, it was revealed that the police committed several violations. Specifically, they were criticized for interrogating the 15-year-old without any adults present, such as his legal guardians or parents, and without a lawyer. The boy was pressured and forced to confess. During this time, law enforcement was more focused on building the case and finding evidence of Luke's guilt. They visited his home again and conducted another search of his room. His house was searched 3 times in total. Surprisingly, no blood was found in the house. However, many suspicious items were discovered and later used to accuse him of a brutal crime. Among these items, investigators confiscated a large number of Marilyn Manson CDs and copies of Manson's film Doppelhörs. A particular 10-minute scene in the film, where the main character committed a brutal crime against a black dahlia, was of great interest. Many drew parallels between the film and the real tragedy, leading to the belief that Luke was simply imitating his idols. Investigators suspected that Luke might have timed the massacre to coincide with a cult or ritual inspired by his favorite rock bands. He was eventually arrested, bringing relief to the city's residents, who viewed him as a murderer, Satanist, and psychopath, posing a danger to society. His eccentricities were publicly scrutinized, although they had not harmed anyone, until Jodi's murder. Rumors and sensational stories quickly spread. The case was heard in the Supreme Court of Edinburgh. However, Luke denied any involvement in Jodi's death. The prosecution argued that he was guilty of killing his girlfriend Jodi, pointing out that he discovered her body, even though he used a specially trained dog. Jodi's mother claimed that he brought the dog himself. Additionally, a witness reported seeing a man resembling Luke in a khaki jacket with Jodi near the crime scene, hugging, around the time before she passed away. However, this testimony has caused much controversy, as other witnesses reported seeing 2 men, and the witness ultimately could not positively identify Luke. At the trial, Luke's ex-girlfriend testified that he once threatened her with a knife, which frightened her greatly. However, he claimed he had an alibi, but it was unreliable. Luke's brother stated that on the day of the incident, he was alone in the house watching TV. However, their mother, Corinne, said she was at home with Luke at that time, and the brother was just in his room and mistaken. Despite this, the brother insisted he was alone, watching adult films, which he only did when no one else was home. Eventually, Corinne admitted she had lied, and Luke was indeed not at home. They faced consequences for this, and she was even held accountable. So, where was Luke? He never revealed his whereabouts, and it was impossible to track his phone. The prosecution presented a reconstruction of the events. According to the prosecutor, Luke and Jodi met near a tree with their initials a little after 5 p.m. About 50 minutes later, he was seen alone. The prosecution claimed that he was fascinated by the story of the Black Dahlia and had watched a film of the same name, which included a disturbing scene of a massacre. Witnesses mentioned that he occasionally smoked a pipe. Then, he allegedly contemplated acting out something he saw in the film and harmed Jodi. It was also revealed that he accused possessed a small case containing a knife, engraved with Jodi's initials and her birth and death years. The case also had a note stating that the best day of he was the one that never came, a quote from Kurt Cobain, who was his idol. While none of this directly proves a crime, but the prosecution interpreted these details as suspicious coincidences, all pointing to he. The prosecutor's office believed Jodi had been killed with a particular knife, but the knife vanished and couldn't be found for comparison. Luke couldn't explain its disappearance. Neighbors of Luke testified during the trial that on the evening of Jodi's death, Luke burned something in his backyard. The prosecution suspected that this was how he disposed of the clothes he wore during the crime. Witnesses mentioned that the fire had a strange odor. However, when police searched his house, they found nothing significant. They did confiscate a large steel barrel used for burning garbage. In total, 122 items were confiscated in connection to the case. Notably, a new khaki jacket which a witness had seen disappeared from Luke's house. The prosecutor suggested that he burned it to hide blood stains. The jacket, purchased by his mother shortly before the murder, was last seen on him that day and then mysteriously vanished, raising further suspicions. A witness, a friend of Luke, testified at the trial. He claimed to have had a strange conversation with Luke shortly before the murder. Luke allegedly said that the best way to kill someone was by cutting their throat and mentioned that Luke could imagine killing someone. That day, Luke was texting Jodi, with their last message exchange occurring between 16:35 and 16:54. After 1700 hours, Luke called the information service to ask for the exact time. This was puzzling because if he was at home, as claimed, he could have just checked his watch. The lawyers argued that there was no evidence against Luke. Besides Luke's DNA, DNA from 2 other men was found at the crime scene. But only one was identified. It belonged to a friend of Janine. The prosecution suggested that these traces were present because Jodi wore Janine's shirt. Luke's DNA was on her bras, and her DNA was on his pants, but since they were in an intimate relationship, the presence of their DNA on each other's clothes was considered irrelevant to the murder case. The defense contended that Luke was eccentric, a fact he didn't deny. Yes, he was a rude teenager interested in strange things, but none of these were direct indicators of guilt. The lawyers attempted to demonstrate that he couldn't have committed the crime against his girlfriend. The numerous stab wounds to the throat nearly detached her head from her body. Forensic experts counted about 20 wounds in the neck area alone, while Jodi fought back desperately. Luke would have certainly sustained defensive marks, yet no witnesses or police officers noticed any on him during the search. There were no scratches on his face or body. The lawyers argued that he didn't have a motive for murder. He loved his girlfriend and valued their relationship. Why would he murder her, especially on a day when all restrictions imposed by her mother were lifted. They shared a serious romantic relationship filled with tender feelings and rarely argued. It just didn't make sense. The case was highly controversial, ultimately left for the jury to decide. On January 20, 2005, the jury began their deliberation. After about 5 hours, they concluded that Luke was guilty of first-degree murder. On February 11th, the verdict stated that the 16-year-old would face at least 20 years in prison before eligibility for parole. However, many still doubted his involvement, believing that 2 people were involved in the murder. This thing allowed he to file several appeals, which were denied. Luke's mother had to sell their house and buy a smaller one to afford the legal fees. She fully supports her son and believes in his innocence. In 2019, a fund was established to raise money to support a man named Luke and to file new appeals on his behalf. However, the site hosting the fund eventually blocked it because it violated the site's terms. Despite these setbacks, Luke remained determined. Since 2003, when he was first accused of killing his girlfriend, he has consistently denied involvement. He made it clear that even if he were offered release in exchange for a confession, he would not accept it because he would never harm Jodi, his girlfriend. Luke had numerous supporters who, after hearing the guilty verdict in court, distributed flyers throughout the city proclaiming his innocence. So strong was their support that they even considered storming the prison. Their aim was to highlight what they believed to be Luke's wrongful conviction. However, their approach was questionable. Such actions could potentially harm Luke's case, and they also negatively impacted the Jones family, who were unjustly blamed for the situation and even received threats. In May 2007, the controversial trial resulted in the creation of a documentary about the case, which renewed interest in Luke's case. Moreover, this film revealed numerous irregularities committed by the police in charge of the investigation. Initially, the police considered Luke innocent, although they investigated him as a suspect. However, as more was learned about him, they found unconventional and unknown aspects. Most of the townspeople had a clearly negative opinion. Amid rumors and the extraordinary behavior of the town's eccentric, the investigation ceased to consider other people as suspects. All the evidence was circumstantial. Even Jodi's wounds, initially believed to resemble movie cuts, did not match so much. In fact, it was even questioned whether Luke was really a fan of Satanism and Marilyn Manson. He just followed some unpopular trends of his teenage years. To prove his innocence, Luke agreed to take a polygraph test on April 25, 2012. He passed the test successfully. 2 months later, the mother of he also underwent the polygraph test, and experts confirmed that both passed flawlessly. The documentary explored a theory that the murder might have been committed by a student who had written an essay about the murder of a girl in the woods a few weeks before Jodi's death. A friend of this student saw him shortly after the crime and noticed scratches on his face. Luke's family believes the investigation overlooked a crucial piece of evidence: condoms containing unknown male DNA. No DNA from Luke was found. They argue that the motive for the murder was rape, with the rapist attacking she and dragging her into the woods. They feel the investigation should focus more on this angle. Additionally, they claimed that when Jodi's mother came to Luke's house, he had not yet showered, yet there was no blood on him. They argue that if he were the killer, he would have showered and changed clothes immediately to wash off any blood. Years ago, the crime scene was vandalized with red graffiti referencing Jodi's murder. The message included a different name, suggesting that another person might be the murderer. This graffiti is believed to have been painted by Luke's supporters to assert his innocence. Luke's family hired 2 private detectives who identified several suspects, with Mark Kane among them. Mark was a local drug addict who died suddenly in May 2018 at age 38. Witnesses saw him at the crime scene on the day of the murder, with a scratched face and known to carry a knife. He claimed the scratches were from falling into bushes, but no one believed him given the context of Jodi's murder. However, despite his suspicious background, all suspects, including Mark, were eventually interrogated and cleared from the list. The family of Jodi is certain that the person who killed their daughter is Luke, the one currently in prison. They have no doubt about his guilt. Meanwhile, Luke's family continues their pursuit of justice. Almost 2 decades have passed since his imprisonment, and his legal team has accused investigators of multiple violations, notably the absence of forensic analysis on several DNA samples from Jodi, particularly those related to allegations of rape. This significant oversight has cast doubt on the conviction. Luke's lawyers are determined to overturn the sentence. Now 35 years old, Luke might be eligible for parole in 2025. However, he reportedly failed a random test this year. By regulation, after this point, the opportunity for parole will be postponed for another 3 years.